Good morning. It's 6 o'clock. On today's show, in his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney tells Sky News Canadians are not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump.
The US president has signed a flurry of deals with Saudi Arabia worth more than £450 billion. This morning, his Middle East tour moves on to Qatar.
It does indeed. It's Wednesday, the 14th of May coming up. Canada's new Prime Minister says the UK's offer of a second state visit to Donald Trump cuts across Ottawa's efforts to defend their sovereignty.
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance.
Also ahead, Israel kills at least 16 people in a strike on a hospital in Gaza. We hear from two terminally ill adults on opposing sides of the assisting dying debate.
This is an absolute decision about myself.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
And a chance for freedom for the Menendez brothers after 35 years in jail for killing their parents in a crime that captivated America. And Sunderland booked their place at Wembley for the Championship playoff final against Sheffield United. Good morning, everyone. Well, we start with a big exclusive today. In his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump. He said the UK's offer of an unprecedented second state visit to the US president cut across the clear messages Canada was sending to the White House to defend their sovereignty. Mr. Carney was speaking to Sky's Sam Washington ahead of the King's visit to open Canada's Parliament later this month for the first time in nearly 50 years, and this is her report.
Mark Carney sworn in as Canada's Prime Minister for the second time this year. An improbable election victory made possible in part by Donald Trump's threats. Having campaigned on a message that America wanted to break Canada in order to own it, the former Bank of England governor has called on his king for help.
His Majesty coming sends a message first and foremost to Canadians. All issues around Canadian sovereignty have been accentuated by the president, so no, it's not coincidental.
And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King.
It follows Sir Keir Starmer personally handing a letter of invitation from the King to the President for an unprecedented second UK state visit.
What did Canadians make of that?
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear. Some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
So do you personally think that a state visit to the UK for President Trump is appropriate, given that backdrop?
Well, that's a judgment for the government of the United Kingdom and the palace.
I'm sure you have an opinion.
Well, you reference, I have an opinion on many things, some of which I keep to myself.
The King is going to sit here alongside the Queen. It'll be the first time in nearly 50 years that the head of state will open Parliament here in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister is clear that it is an assertion of Canadian sovereignty, made all the more important because of Donald Trump's threats.
Despite his campaign rhetoric never to meet the president while he disrespected Canada, Carney's first visit since re-election was to the White House.
Why did you meet him?
He was expressing a desire. He wasn't calling, he'd shifted from the expectation to a desire for that to happen. He was also coming from a place where he recognized that wasn't going to happen. I made it clear to him.
Do you think that he ever intended to annex Canada?
There's wish and reality. Did he want to? Did it look like an attractive combination to him? Yes. Does he still muse about it? Perhaps. Is it ever going to happen? No, never.
With Ukraine's sovereignty also imperiled, Trump has positioned himself as peacemaker-in-chief.
Do you trust that he's an honest broker in that regard, in representing the interests of Ukraine, Europe and the West?
I do. A straight answer, I do. The positions of Canada, the UK, all the coalition, the willing, Ukraine, and the United States are converging towards this unconditional 30-day ceasefire demand of Russia. So the president has been helpful.
Mark Carney will be hoping Trump's help extends a little closer to home if he's to deliver for Canadians. Samantha Washington, Sky News in Ottawa.
Well, Mara's here now to discuss this exclusive by Sam Washington. So the Canadians clearly not happy that the UK is rolling out that red carpet for a leader who's threatening sovereignty of the Canadians. How does Keir Starmer then navigate this? Because it's going to be a tricky relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think there was a really great piece of reporting there from Sam Washington, and it speaks to the fact that we've got one of our oldest, closest Commonwealth allies we share a head of state, King Charles, feeling perhaps abandoned by the UK slightly. And I think it's really interesting that Mark Carney, first of all, let's not forget that to an extent, Trump's threats to Canadian sovereignty was realistically one of the main reasons he won that election. He came out strongly against Trump. He was the kind of anti-Trump candidate in comparison to Pierre Poilievre. And therefore, it's in his interest to continue to be that kind of anti-Trump persona, because that is what people voted for. And therefore, obviously, he can't be therefore thanking the UK for, cozying up to Trump, cozying up to that administration. But nonetheless, I think the difficulty is this speaks to a strained relationship at the moment, perhaps between the UK and Canada. Not so much in so that there's going to be any issues around our relationship or trade, but in terms of the fact that there appears to be, from what Mark Carney said in that interview, a level of disappointment on the Canadian side of the UK, perhaps not backing them up, as it were, diplomatically, than they were expecting. And I also think, Carney inviting King Charles to open Parliament for the first time in 50 years, that a head of state has gone and done that. I think, yes, it doesn't necessarily make that much of a difference, but it's very symbolic.
Yes.
Politically, it is symbolic. And it's a really strong sign of sovereignty, and Canada trying to say, Canada's not for sale, we're going nowhere, we're a sovereign nation, this is our head of state, and we welcome him, and we want him to be a part of our political system, as it were. And I think really also it speaks to the fact that Keir Starmer has a really difficult job in order to try and not alienate the Canadians, not make the Canadians feel that they aren't being supported by one of their strongest allies, but also keeping Trump on side, also not aggravating the Trump administration and trying to, metaphorically kiss the ring, as it were, and get us, a good trade deal, where we saw a trade deal announced last week. So really, really tough for Keir Starmer, but clearly the Canadians are saying you've got the balance wrong.
Interesting to see how this plays out. Maury, thank you as always. Really appreciate that. Well, talking of Donald Trump, the US president began his tour of the Middle East in Saudi Arabia with the aim of signing deals. And he's agreed what the White House says is the biggest arms deal in history. It was part of a $600 billion agreement, which he said would make a bond between the two countries stronger than ever. And then just a reminder, this morning he'll head to Qatar for the second leg of his tour. It's been lavish, hasn't it? Now, the United Nations top humanitarian official has condemned Israel for, in his words, deliberately and unashamedly blocking aid to Gaza. Well, it comes after Gaza's health ministry, which is run by Hamas, claimed at least 16 people were killed following an Israeli strike on a hospital. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has ruled out an end to the war in Gaza, even if a deal is reached to release more hostages. Alistair Bunkle has the latest from Jerusalem.
Massive strikes on the European hospital. I mean, the pictures filmed by people who are nearby show a series, like a chain of explosions and plumes of black smoke. Terrifying for anyone close to it. Looks as though possibly they were using perhaps some sort of bunker-busting bombs. the IDF have confirmed that that was the target. They say that they had intelligence that there was a Hamas command and control center underneath the hospital. And although they haven't explicitly come out and said that they were targeting Mohammed Sinwar, that is what we are being told. They believe that he was under the hospital. And Sinwar is a very key figure in Gaza. He became the leader of Hamas in Gaza after his brother Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October the 7th, was killed by the IDF in Rafah back in October. Mohammed Sinwar, sources close to some of the mediation talks say that he was particularly stubborn. He's blamed by the Israelis of putting blockers in the way sometimes in progress for the talks to happen. And so we wait to see whether or not his death is confirmed. As you say, Hamas have denied it, but obviously no proof of life. The IDF haven't said one way or the other, but it will be hard for them to confirm it. They'll have to rely on things like perhaps communications intercepts if they do have any human intelligence sources on the ground, because they're not going to get their own boots close to the site of that strike.
The Royal College of Psychiatrists has pulled its support for the assisted dying bill. So MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. Well, it comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland passed the first stage at Holyrood. 70 MSPs backed the bill, which would allow terminally ill, mentally competent adults to seek medical help to end their lives. It will now be scrutinised by Scottish Parliament ahead of a final vote. Well, Sadia Chowdhury has spoken to people on both sides of the debate.
I would like to have the choice that at a time and place of my choosing, when death is close, to be able to take something to hasten my death.
There could be a cure for what you and I have got, but we just don't know about it.
There are amazing
So you
medical
don't know what
advances.
miracle is just around the corner, and if you commit suicide, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity.
Being able to let go, to feel safe.
Once you've drunk that, my friend, you cannot change your mind. What
For
about the poor
everyone,
suckers who are there with you? They've got to live with the fact that you died, and they let you.
My daughters are completely supportive of assisted dying.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
This is an absolute decision about myself. It's not about other people with terminal or life-limiting disease. It's certainly not about people with disabilities.
It's financial. You can save millions of pounds by getting people to bump themselves off.
We'll bring you an extended version of that discussion between Claire and Philip at 6:30. And remember, if you've been affected by the story, you can contact the Samaritans at any time on 116123 or email joe@samaritans.org. Now, Eric and Lyle Menendez, two brothers serving time in a California jail for the murder of their parents in 1989, have been given a fresh chance at freedom. Well, Ashton is here to tell us a bit more about this. This case captivated America back then and more recently now too.
This is one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. As you referenced there, Eric and Lyle were jailed for life without parole after their brutal and quite horrific murder of their parents in 1989 in their Beverly Hills home. And because they were given that sentence, the prosecution had argued at the time this was a brutal, cold-blooded murder, a premeditated act in order to gain access to a hefty inheritance. Now, the brothers' defence have always argued this was not about the money. The brothers have always said this was in reaction to years of abuse at the hands of their father. And last year, this reignited public fascination and it led to multiple iterations of this story, Netflix, among many other documentaries. And a judge essentially last year asked the LA District Attorney to change the brother's sentence to 50 years to life. So yesterday, a judge did just that, paving the way for the brothers to be able to access parole, but also potentially to be released from prison. That's because, as you mentioned, under California's young offenders law, if you've committed a crime under the age of 26, that's something you'll be eligible for in terms of parole. We heard yesterday in quite an extraordinary courtroom scenario. We saw relatives of the brothers coming forward, iterating their support. We heard from Lyle himself saying via a statement, "I killed my mum and dad. I make no excuses and also no justification. The impact of my violent actions is unfathomable." Now, the judge's decision doesn't mean that the brothers will be immediately released from prison. That's for the State Parole Board to decide, but it does pave the way for that to happen, with the judge yesterday saying, "I'm not saying they should be released. It's not for me to decide, but I do believe they've done enough in the past 35 years and that they should get that chance."
Yeah, huge case that. All right, Ashna, thanks for bringing us up to date. OK, let's take a look at some other stories making headlines for you this morning as you wake up. A former girlfriend of rapper Sean Diddy Combs has told his sex trafficking and racketeering trial that he beat her frequently. The R&B singer Cassie Ventura, who will return to court today, also said that his drug-fuelled sex parties made her stomach churn. R&B singer Cassie Ventura is due back in court today. Combs, of course, denies all of the charges against him. The Conservative MP, Patrick Spencer, has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault, which are alleged to have happened at London's Groucho Club. Mr Spencer, who represents Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, is accused of 2 separate incidents involving 2 women. This was in August 2022. He says he categorically denies the charges. Thousands of civil service jobs will be relocated from London to 13 towns and cities across the country. The closures, including one of the largest Whitehall buildings, will reduce the number of roles in the capital by about 12,000 and save almost £100 million per year, the government say. Let's take a look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather. Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week looks warm and settled, with shower risks reducing, but eastern coast will of course be cooler. It's mostly fine out there now, if a little chilly for some, but parts of north-east Britain a bit grey. That cloud will move across north-east England this morning, but elsewhere it'll be mostly sunny. It'll be largely dry, but a few showers will break out across the south of Ireland and the southwest of England. It'll turn out warm, although eastern coast will be cooler, especially in the brisk wind down the North Sea.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show. Donald Trump receives a lavish royal welcome to Saudi Arabia as he kickstarts his tour of the Middle East.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
The Premier League
Running is live on USA and streaming on Peacock. Only 2 matches remain.
The climax of the Premier League season.
Friday, exclusively on Peacock. Top 5 hopeful Chelsea host Man United. Sunday on USA. Newcastle continue to fight for Champions League qualification when they visit Arsenal. This is the Premier League Run-In. Live on USA and Peacock.
Welcome back. Donald Trump will head to Qatar today for the second stop in his tour of the Middle East. The US president received a lavish welcome in Saudi Arabia, where he agreed what the White House is calling the biggest arms deal in history with Saudi Arabia. Sky's Mark Stone has this report from Riyadh.
It was an air escort fit for a king. Saudi fighter jets flanking Air Force One on the president's approach into a place where he feels comfortable. If the Saudi-US relationship has had its ebbs, well, it feels now like it's flowing. Down to the tie with the carpet, there is a match between this president and the Crown Prince here to greet him. Just as he did in his last term, Donald Trump has chosen Saudi Arabia again for his first major foreign trip. Now, though, they are 2 leaders more confident, more powerful, more self-assured, and they see opportunities and money. This was the full Saudi welcome from a country transformed so fast, where change that took Western nations centuries has happened here in 1 generation. Trump the president was here, but so too was Trump the businessman. In a gilded palace and with America's most successful CEOs with him, he must have felt quite at home. The so-called tech bros had traveled thousands of miles to be here. The richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and the man shaping AI, Sam Altman, among a long list of founders and CEOs from some of the world's biggest companies here for investment. Because symbiosis is what all this is about. It's about what America can offer Saudi Arabia, but now more than ever, it's about what the Saudis can do for America. And so the signing ceremony was the first order of the day, and the jewel in the crown, a $600 billion strategic economic partnership deal with the Saudis, including the largest defense sales agreement in history, we're told.
This is, of course, a relationship that stretches back many, many decades through consecutive presidencies and 1 royal family. But it feels now to be more important and with more opportunity than ever before.
The president got the trip down memory lane as he arrived at the investment forum. Inside, the soundtrack was his, playing now in Riyadh, and with a smattering of MAGA hats. The American cabinet, the Saudi royal court, and the billionaires' front row.
You achieved a modern miracle, the Arabian way. That's a good way.
For his speech of the day.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western intervention, giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves.
Well, that was a pretty remarkable speech, despite the tariffs and the upending of the world order that we've seen over the past few months. The message there was that America is open for business, politically, economically, ready to build bridges, put differences to one side, and work with all countries in this region, even Yemen, Syria, and Iran.
A key headline was Syria. He said he's scrapping sanctions against the country, now free from Assad. It comes as the White House revealed that he is due to meet Syria's new president, once a jihadi fighting the Americans. They'll meet in the day ahead.
It might confuse some people. When he's doing his speeches in America, it's all about America first. We don't really care about the rest of the world, seems to be the vibe. And then here, it was a wholly different message, I felt.
I think there's a misperception. I think the truth is that he obviously cares about peace around the world, and he spent his entire 4 or 5 months of his administration sending his emissaries around the world to create peace deals, right?
We're strategic partners. They need us and we need them. I mean, that's just the way the ball rolls.
The evening was the state banquet. The morning will bring the diplomacy. He'll meet key Arab leaders before travelling on to Qatar, where they will surely try to outdo the spectacle today. Mark Stone, Sky News in Riyadh.
Well, Donald Trump's Middle East tour is, of course, the main talking point on today's episode of Trump 100. Our US correspondents, that's Mark Stone and James Matthews, look at why the first major foreign trip of his second presidency has taken on a new importance.
The message from the speech seemed to be that America is ready to build bridges, to put disagreements to one side with all the countries in the region, including the likes of Syria, Yemen, even Iran.
Yeah.
Effectively, it was kind of get in line. Don't mess with us. Don't interfere with our interests. But if you want to work with us, let's do it for all our benefit. And I kind of got the sense that he was talking to Iran when he was surrounding himself by this opulence and by these Arab leaders and, saying to Iran, you like what you see here? You want a bit of this? Well, play ball and you can have it.
And if you scan the QR code, it's on the right of the screen. You can listen to the latest episode of the Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts. Well, we're heading for a break, but on our return, we'll hear from two terminally ill adults on opposing sides of the assisted dying bill.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Premier League running is live on USA and streaming on Peacock. Only 2 matches remain.
The climax of the Premier League season.
Friday, exclusively on Peacock. Top 5 hopeful Chelsea host Man United. Sunday on USA. Newcastle continue to fight for Champions League qualification when they visit Arsenal. This is the Premier League run-in. Live on USA and Peacock.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we'll take a look at this morning's papers with Mari. But first, let's just recap today's top stories for you. In his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians weren't impressed by Sir Keir Starmer's decision to invite Donald Trump on a second state visit to the UK.
It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
At least 16 people have been killed and 70 others injured in an Israeli strike on a hospital in Gaza. Israel claimed it targeted a Hamas command centre beneath the site in Khan Yunis. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sworn there's no way Israel will stop the war until Hamas is defeated. A Californian judge has reduced the Menendez brothers' murder sentences, meaning they could be eligible for parole. Eric and Lyle Menendez received life sentences after being convicted of murdering their parents, Jose and Kitty. This was in 1989, while the brothers maintain that they acted out of self-defence after years of sexual abuse. And the Royal College of Psychiatrists has pooled its support for assisted dying bill. MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. It comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland passed the first stage at Holyrood. Let's stay with this story, actually, because the debate over assisted dying can often be intensely personal. Claire and Philip both have incurable forms of cancer and have been given just months to live. Both, though, very different views on assisted dying. Last year, Sky News filmed with them as they watched the country debate whether to change the law to allow it. And a warning, this report from Sadia Chowdhury contains descriptions of assisted dying and suicide throughout.
Bristol Temple meets next stop in a few moments' time.
My name's Claire and I live on a gorgeous farm in North Devon and I've got two fabulous daughters, Chloe and Izzy. I'm travelling up to Bristol today to meet a man called Philip, who I haven't met in person before, but he is against assisted dying, and I've been campaigning for the assisted dying bill to pass through Parliament.
Claire is 60 years old. She has stage 4 breast cancer and doctors have stopped giving her chemotherapy. They say she could have just months to live.
It's a good place to live and a good place to die, I'd say.
Last year, Claire was in a Sky News report on assisted dying.
And I will trust in you.
The piece also heard from Philip, who lives with his wife Pauline in the Midlands. Philip has pancreatic cancer and he too could have just months left to live.
In you alone.
The ice to the right, 330. The nose to the left, 275.
Sky News has been following both Claire and Philip as they watch the country debate legalising assisted dying. Today, they're on their way to meet each other to let the country watch them debate.
We'll be discussing the things for and against the assisted dying bill, or assisted suicide as I call it. And I'm against it because as far as I'm aware, our times are in God's hands and we should be looking to him.
There's a swallow going over. That's the first one I've seen this year. We're halfway, I think, between each other's homes. And yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting someone with different opinions than I've got. And yeah, very interested in hearing what he's got to say.
Wait a minute. Wait. Dear me.
Hello, Philip.
Hi, Claire.
Hello.
It's lovely of you to come.
It's so lovely to meet you.
Lovely of you to come.
Oh, I'm feeling a bit strange. I'm on a huge dose of steroids at the moment.
Right.
And it's making me go a bit nutty, so you'll have to forgive me, Philip.
You might fit in with me then.
It's like, who would want to live forever, really, in this world?
For Philip, the idea of dignity in dying was embedded decades ago when he saw his mother put her trust in God.
She said, I can't remember the exact words either, but God, please either heal me or take me. And I realised that really my mum must have believed in God and trusted God. I keep saying to the doctor consultant when I see him, I keep praying that God will stop it growing.
I would like to have the choice that at a time and place of my choosing, when death is close, to be able to take something to hasten my death.
There could be a cure for what you and I have got. but we just don't know about it.
There are amazing
So you don't know what
advances.
miracle is just around the corner, and if you commit suicide, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity.
Philip isn't planning for death as much as he's planning for life after it. He's spent his life preaching his Christian values. He enjoys music, his garden, and having his family over. Claire is aware these could be her final days. Her days are spent on her farm, visiting flower shows and with her daughters.
So we went out, obviously broken-hearted. We rang the kids and told them.
Was that the hardest part, Philip?
Yes.
Yeah, for me as well.
Yeah.
Telling my daughters.
Since their diagnoses, both have different approaches to life.
My liver is 20 shades of grey on a scan.
Yeah.
And, yeah, all of my bones pretty much, except for hands and feet and...
Horrible.
And then I had docetaxel to begin with. Did you have any docetaxel?
I'm very, very grateful. I've refused all.
Have you not had any chemotherapy?
I've had nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can absolutely... If I hadn't got the girls, I wouldn't have had anything. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. And I think that, for me, it's about being able to let go, to feel safe, to feel secure.
Once you've drunk that, my friend, you cannot change your mind. What
For
about the poor
everyone,
suckers
isn't
who are
it?
there with you? They've got to live with the fact that you died, and they let you.
Oh, my daughters are...
Whoever.
So I would choose, if they want to be there, I'd like my daughters to
But
be
what I'm saying
there.
is, it's easy now to say, I'll be with you, Claire, and I'll sit there. But a year from now, after you've gone, I'm thinking, I could have persuaded her not to.
With the greatest of respect, because you don't know my daughters at all.
I don't know anybody.
Yeah, so...
I don't even know myself.
my daughters are completely supportive of assisted dying.
You're saying I want to end my life now. I want to be in control.
Now,
I mean,
I'm not saying now, Philip.
Yeah, okay.
I'm definitely not saying now. I'm enjoying
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
meeting you too much.
Well, I'm glad about that. That's the same here. That's what I say. I mean, don't forget, I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
But the proposed change of law covers a very limited number of people.
They're not.
And at the moment, over 300 people with terminal illnesses take their own life in pretty miserable situations, quite often alone, quite often unsafely every year. This is an absolute decision about myself. It's not about other people with terminal or life-limiting disease. It's certainly not about people with disabilities. It's certainly not about any other person who's struggling in life. But it's purely an option for Claire Turner.
I can follow that, but the snag is that if they alter the law for Claire Turner, they've got to alter it for everybody. And you've only got to look and see what's happened in other countries. Canada originally, this is the criteria. Now it's much wider. Belgium, much wider. Holland, much wider. Holland, I seem to remember, is now even talking about young people.
Yeah, I'm going to go and wash my
You've always
tomatoes.
wanted to wash tomatoes. You got up this morning thinking,
I'm not allowed
really
to
looking
eat
forward
them,
to washing
but I'm going to look forward to washing them.
Either.
Oh, they do smell, they smell good, so I shall enjoy that. It's been interesting meeting Philip, but I feel quite tired, which I hadn't expected.
She's not suffering as much as I thought she would be, which I'm very grateful, because it's horrible to see people are suffering.
Perhaps he really thinks I'm a sinner and he needs to save me, and I don't need saving.
She could present her thoughts as scientific, but you could only prove it if you come back from the dead and say, I died, look, I'm all right. Which ain't going to happen.
There's
There's a bedroom there if you want to go and lie down or relax or do anything.
Won't wake up again if I go to sleep. You're going to have
Well, that would be ideal for you, wouldn't it? That would be natural.
Yeah.
That would be God's timing. It's financial.
Okay.
Nothing to do with what's right and wrong, it's financial. You can save millions of pounds by getting people to bump themselves off.
Theoretically, that's true.
Yeah.
But there are safeguards, and actually, this law is so limited.
If it's costing hundreds of thousands to look after you, just think what we could save if we bumped 20
But you're being really cynical.
No,
and
I'm
you're
being honest.
I'm finding,
I'm sorry,
doing that and
I've had
rubbing
to
your
deal with
hands
finance.
together.
I deal with the tax office.
But I find that quite offensive, Philip.
Well, I'm not
I
really
do
offensive.
not believe that I belong to a country with the medical profession and with our community and our society that want to bump people off.
Yes,
in the
but the
medical
point is the
profession.
change to the National Insurance Health Act will be not only to treat people for care, but also to help people end their lives. That is a drastic change.
Which is why we need an organised path forward, which is safe, which is regulated.
I accept that that's your view, but I'll just say my understanding is that that's not how it will work out.
Okay, Philip.
You know,
Yeah.
I know.
I can hear, and it sounds like you're pretty fearful around that.
No, I'm fearful for the people. You know?
I guess I'm just not a cynical person. I'm really not.
I'm not a cynical person. I'm actually facing reality.
There's just enough time left for both to exchange gifts before heading home.
For
Au
you,
revoir.
young lady.
Let's say au revoir, Philip, rather than
Au revoir.
goodbye, shall we?
And when you look at those chocolates, I was going to get you Rose's chocolates because I thought you live in the country and you like flowers. But if you read what they're called...
Oh, what are they called?
Heroes.
Heroes.
Because I think anybody who is battling with cancer is a hero, not to quit.
Oh, thank you,
Because
Philip.
it's very easy to quit.
This honey is made by my dear neighbour. She's called Pip.
Philip and Claire have very distinct, opposing views around death and dying.
In faith, I'm going to trust in God. Amen.
But it is clear they both share an energetic love for life. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Interactive tree.
And just a reminder, if you've been affected by this story, you can contact the Samaritans at any time on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. OK, let's take a look at your latest sport this morning.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and flourish. One of the long-standing complaints by aspiring coaches in this country surrounds the FA courses. Too expensive, not enough places, too much prevalence given to former players. So what exactly are the qualifications that you need? Beginners start on the Introduction to Coaching Football. Around 28,000 people do this a year at a cost of £100. Next is the UEFA C licence. Between 5,500 and 6,000 places are available. That one costs £650. 750 places are available on the UEFA B licence. This costs £1,200. You can manage in League 1 and League 2 with this qualification. The UEFA A licence costs climb.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Let's take a look at today's weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week looks warm and settled with the shower risk reducing, but eastern coast will be cooler. It's mostly fine out there now, if a little chilly for some, but parts of north-east Britain are grey, and that cloud will move across north-east England this morning, but elsewhere it will be mostly sunny. It'll be largely dry, but a few showers will break out across the south of Ireland and southwest England. It'll turn out warm, although eastern coast will be cooler, especially in the brisk wind down the North Sea.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we'll be taking a look at all the day's top stories in today's papers in our news review with Mari.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Premier League Running is live on USA and streaming on Peacock. Only 2 matches remain.
The climax of the Premier League season.
Friday, exclusively on Peacock. Top 5 hopeful Chelsea host Man United. Sunday on USA. Newcastle continue to fight for Champions League qualification when they visit Arsenal. This is the Premier League Run-In. Live on USA and Peacock.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Welcome back, everyone. Mari's here because we're going to discuss some of the stories that have picked up our interest in the papers this morning. We're going to start with the Daily Telegraph because we reported this breaking news yesterday that devices exploded outside properties linked to the Prime Minister, and now counter-terrorism police. What's their investigations and where has it taken them?
So, what's really interesting is the fact that the police are essentially keeping an open mind for now on the motivations behind these arson attacks and also who might be behind it. So, Telegraph is reporting that counter-terrorism police are exploring or investigating the possibility that a hostile state could actually be behind this or involved in this. Now, they're also talking about other possibilities. So, for instance, whether it could be terrorism. They're also exploring whether the person could have been a lone actor with a personal grudge against the Prime Minister. Wow. So we still don't really have the clarity yet on exactly why this has happened. The suspect was detained in a place called Sydenham in south-east London, so not really anywhere near where those arson attacks took place, in terms of that being over in north-east London. And interestingly, the head of counter-terrorism issued a statement, which is relatively rare, where he urged MPs who might have concerns to talk to the police, to go to the police about those worries. And this is because we know that MPs often face attacks, hostility. Exactly, there you go, that's the car. Isn't you're seeing the images now. I mean, it is horrendous, really frightening. And I think not only will Keir Starmer's family be pretty horrified, I would be if I was them, but also I think lots of MPs on all sides of the House, of all political colours, have seen this as just a moment of reflection and really shock and horror, I suppose, at the danger that unfortunately they live with every day. I mean, it's crackers really to think that actually people who are public servants at the end of the day can be subject to such threats, and we'll see what comes out of the investigation. We don't want to speculate. And this
property he rents out to, is it his sister-in-law?
Sister-in-law, yeah, for a peppercorn rent, which essentially means you haven't got to declare it. And so it's all above board. But yeah, it is really quite shocking. And then the third location was another property that Starmer used to live in the 90s as well. So it feels to be some level of kind of calculation or planning on this, but we will have to wait until we know more details.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to move on to the Times now.
Okay.
Co-op shelves empty. This is after the hacking that's causing issues to the supply chain. So about 2.5 weeks ago, I was in M&S, went to get a whole big haul for a kids' party, pizzas and cakes, and I was told, no, you can't do that, we can't take this payment at the time, because this group had hacked into M&S. But now, a whole host of supermarkets, including Co-op, Harrods also has been affected. Marks and Spencer's were the first that we heard about. But the issue now is that many of these Co-ops in particular, that may be the only store that sells food in a village, in a remote part of the country, their shelves are empty. Because in the way that Co-op run things, if they go to a warehouse, they deliver it. That's how they do it. But because these hackers have gained access to their data, they've decided to take themselves off online, and so they have to then have the issues of, well, they've got nothing on the shelves, and it's really impacting. And then the other fallout and the worry about all of this is that yesterday they revealed that, along with M&S, that data had been compromised. So things like addresses, your name, but also, crucially, linked to M&S, order history. Yeah. So the issue is, if these hackers that are believed to be English-speaking hackers, potentially teenagers that are operating in the UK and the US, usually it's linked to Russia, which becomes an issue for, them to be caught, essentially. Yeah. If they have these details and they call up vulnerable people and say, oh, we, realise that you've bought some chinos last week at Mr. Smith, and that's how they gain access. And this is the problem now for Co-op, for M&S and other big stores, is the standoff, because it's still a problem. So that is one that I'm quite worried about, because they may have my data.
Yeah, totally, very concerning, and also concerning for anyone who's buying things they shouldn't be.
Oh, right. I'd like to see your inbox on M&S.
No, I just mean there's always that classic idea of like, you know, somebody buying something for somebody they shouldn't be seeing, and then it gets out, and then you can blackmail someone, can't you, and say, I'm going to tell your wife that you bought this for somebody else.
What trashy novels have you been
Anyway,
reading,
you know, sorry, I get my mind out the gutter.
Right, move on to the I now. New migrant rules boost UK hopes for a softer deal with Brexit. How would that work?
So, this is what the I is reporting. They've been speaking to some government sources that are saying that essentially these could potentially complement each other. Now, it might sound contradictory to start with. How's that going to work? Isn't it going to put up migration numbers when the Prime Minister's just said he's going to get them down? But Labour's believing that it could neutralise some of those concerns about immigration if the scheme is capped. So only specific numbers, and if it's time limited. And if it was, then essentially they wouldn't be counted in the migration figures. So if you do get migration down, even that youth mobility, which would technically increase temporary migration, it wouldn't be included in those figures, and therefore it wouldn't affect the numbers that you're trying to show as your kind of your big win or your big show-off moment for Keir Starmer. So this has got this big reset next week on Monday. EU summit in London. Huge amount of work going behind the scenes to get that ready.
OK, to round off the show, we're going to go to the Sun. Pour me a pint. This is because a cat was trapped under the floorboards for more than 3 weeks. Do you know what the cat survived on? Leah the cat? Beer, drinking beer. She was basically rescued from the ordeal early this month with a half-drunk can of French beer. The 11-year-old Moggy looks a bit worse for wear.
She looks off her face.
Need to zoom into that picture. Thank you so much. We'll see you after the break with Wilfred Frost.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. In his first major interview since his election, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, tells Sky News Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump.
We'll speak to Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden shortly and ask him if the government was right to offer the US President an unprecedented second state visit.
Also ahead, how climate change is turning up the heat for expectant mothers.
It's Wednesday, the 14th of May. Your headlines. Canada's new Prime Minister says the UK's offer of a second state visit to Donald Trump cuts across Ottawa's efforts to defend their sovereignty.
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance.
Canada's Prime Minister has also called on the King to help.
Also ahead, Israel kills at least 16 people in a strike on a hospital in Gaza. A chance of freedom for the Menendez brothers after 35 years in jail for killing their parents in a crime that captivated America. And we've got a special report with two terminally ill adults on opposing sides of the assisted dying debate.
This is an absolute decision about myself.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
We start with a major exclusive interview today. In his first big interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump. He said the UK's offer of an unprecedented second state visit to the US President cut across the clear messages Canada was sending to the White House to defend their sovereignty. Mr Carney was speaking to Sky's Sam Washington ahead of the King's visit to open Canada's Parliament later this month for the first time in nearly 50 years. We'll speak to Sam in just a moment to get her full reaction from her extended interview. But first of all, here is her initial report.
Mark Carney sworn in as Canada's Prime Minister for the second time this year. An improbable election victory made possible in part by Donald Trump's threats. Having campaigned on a message that America wanted to break Canada in order to own it, the former Bank of England governor has called on his king for help.
His Majesty coming sends a message first and foremost to Canadians. All issues around Canadian sovereignty have been accentuated by the President, so no, it's not coincidental.
And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King.
It follows Sir Keir Starmer personally handing a letter of invitation from the King to the President for an unprecedented second UK state visit.
What did Canadians make of that?
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
So do you personally think that a state visit to the UK for President Trump is appropriate, given that backdrop?
Well, that's a judgment for the government of the United Kingdom and the Palace.
I'm sure you have an opinion on
Well, you reference, I have opinion on many things, some of which I keep to myself.
The King is going to sit here alongside the Queen. It'll be the first time in nearly 50 years that the head of state will open Parliament here in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister is clear that it is an assertion of Canadian sovereignty, made all the more important because of Donald Trump's threats.
Despite his campaign rhetoric never to meet the President while he disrespected Canada, Carney's first visit since re-election was to the White House.
Why did you meet him?
He was expressing a desire. He wasn't calling, he'd shifted from the expectation to a desire for that to happen. He was also coming from a place where he recognized that wasn't going to happen. I made it clear to him.
Do you think that he ever intended to annex Canada?
there's wish and reality. Did he want to? Did it look like an attractive combination to him? Yes. Does he still muse about it? Perhaps. Is it ever going to happen? No, never.
With Ukraine's sovereignty also imperiled, Trump has positioned himself as peacemaker-in-chief.
Do you trust that he's an honest broker in that regard, in representing the interests of Ukraine, Europe and the West?
I do. A straight answer, I do. The positions of Canada, the UK, all the coalition, the willing, Ukraine and the United States are converging towards this unconditional 30-day ceasefire demand of Russia. So the president has been helpful.
Mark Carney will be hoping Trump's help extends a little closer to home if he's to deliver for Canadians.
Well, Sam joins us now live from Ottawa. Sam, great job. Absolutely fascinating. And I'm looking forward to getting into more of it a little bit later in the programme, specifically on trade. Broadly speaking, though, I'm interested in your take as to whether there's hints that he's going to change tune, maybe not entirely to the more conciliatory Keir Starmer approach, but a little bit from his very aggressive anti-Trump approach because he did that on the election trail. Is there a slight middle ground that's emerging or not?
Well, it's a really pertinent question. And to be fair, today in Ottawa was all about domestic politics, Wilf. I'm standing here outside the Senate building, but all the government buildings are really close by. He was swearing in his new cabinet today, and after that he gave a press conference. And I noticed, attending that press conference, that the subject of Trump just didn't feature didn't loom very large in what he had to say to the assembled journalists. So it already started playing on my mind. I wasn't sure whether it was because today was about domestic politics. But as you saw in that report there, I did ask him why he went to go and meet Donald Trump, given that the president was still threatening his sovereignty, even in the Oval Office when he was sitting there, and did that show weakness on his part? And then he gave the answer that you saw in that report, which was that actually I think the president wants to have a closer relationship with Canada. That's not the same as saying that he is going to demand it or take it by force. I then asked him that very question. I said, so did you use that to your political advantage? Were you essentially frightening Canadians into thinking that Trump's rhetoric was in fact representing intent? Well, he resiled from that, and what he reminded me was that when he took over the Prime Minister role, because he'd become leader of the Liberal Party after Trudeau's resignation, he only had one short perfunctory telephone call with Donald Trump at the height of all of those unveiled threats to Canada's sovereignty, in which they just agreed to speak again after the election. After the election, I think it was the first phone call that he made. They had a far more constructive conversation, I think, that actually took them some way forward. So I think already the path was being paved before his visit to the Oval Office, where I think already tensions were starting to simmer down. So I get the impression that Prime Minister Carney now thinks that he has a path forward to work with Donald Trump. But as you know, and as he said, the ways he works in are unpredictable. So he's preparing for any potential outcome.
Sam, absolutely fantastic stuff. And thanks for staying up for us at 2 a.m. there, as I can see on the clock in the corner. And Sam's going to be back with us at 7:30 with more of that interview, specifically some of the comments on trade. And we're going to be joined by Sir Crawford Falconer as well to discuss that and what he makes of what Canada can do and what trade deals we've got with the US since then. On that topic, Mari, it's a great reminder of the different approaches that various countries have taken. And it's pretty hard to criticise the conciliatory approach of the UK when we did get some form of deal. We can argue about how good it is before other countries, but also when there's less sort of leverage that the UK has than, say, a Saudi Arabia or a China. There weren't that many options available to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is this really speaks to the challenge that Keir Starmer has on his plate in order to keep Trump on side, keep that administration on side, not be punished by tariffs, get that trade deal that we saw announced hastily last week and show that actually his method is working. But simultaneously, that seems to have slightly disappointed, alienated the Canadians. Now, the question will be, does Keir Starmer value the US or Canada more probably the US, but nonetheless, they are a Commonwealth state. We share a head of state, and we have a very close relationship with Canada. So it's a really, really difficult rope to kind of straddle almost for Keir Starmer, where he needs to try and keep both of them happy, while realistically, they are both doing very, very different things with a different kind of direction in terms of policy.
I have to say, I mean, we're going to put this to Pat McFadden in about 5 minutes' time when he joins us, but it felt a little bit rich of Mark Carney to criticise the offer of a state visit by the UK to the US. You know, the King did quite a lot when he's not meant to be political to try and kind of show his love of Canada. You know, the socks he wore and the posts he did on various days. And obviously he's going over there to open Parliament. So again, it feels like you sort of threaded the needle as much as you could. And now Mark Carney doesn't have an election to fight. So I thought that it was, I mean, a fantastic line for Sam to get out of him. But really, really interesting stuff. And we're going to talk, as we said, with Pat McFadden about it in just about 5 minutes' time. But let's get you up to speed now on all of the day's other stories. Leah's got those for us.
Yeah, we're starting with Donald Trump because, of course, the US president began his tour of the Middle East in Saudi Arabia with the aim of signing deals. And he agreed what the White House says is the biggest arms deal in history. It was part of the $600 billion agreement, which he said would make the bond between the two countries stronger than ever. And this morning, he'll head to Qatar for the second leg of his tour. Israel has killed at least 16 people in a strike on a hospital in Gaza. Let's go live to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Alistair, what do we know about this morning?
Well, there were two attacks on two different hospitals in Gaza within 24 hours yesterday, the Nasser Hospital and the European Hospital. In the case of the European Hospital, at least 18 people killed, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. You can see the moment here when a chain of explosions along what the IDF say were underground bunkers that they were targeting. It's understood that they were targeting Mohammed Sinwar, who is the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar, who was killed back in October. Mohammed is now the leader of Hamas in Gaza. Hamas say that he wasn't there and he wasn't killed. There's no proof of life, but at the same time, the IDF haven't confirmed either way whether or not they did kill him. But at least 18 people killed in that strike on that hospital. Images coming out of the hospital show a lot of destruction. There were patients being treated, there were children being treated for cancer in that hospital, and so we wait to see whether or not the IDF confirms that they did hit their target. Otherwise, of course, again, there'll be serious questions about the quality of their intelligence and therefore why they have decided to strike two hospitals in Gaza. Of course, the hospitals in Gaza are on their knees at the moment, not just because of the fighting that's been going on for almost 19 months now, but because of the ongoing humanitarian blockade, which means medical supplies are running extremely low. Donald Trump in Qatar today, no doubt the Qataris and the Americans, both mediators in the Gaza war, will have discussions about what comes next. There is hope that a breakthrough can be found, not just to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, but perhaps a possible ceasefire. But we'll see what comes out of Qatar later.
OK, Alistair, for now, thank you. The Royal College of Psychiatrists have pulled its support for the assisted dying bill. MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday, and it comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland passed the first stage at Holyrood. So 70 MSPs back the bill, which would allow terminally ill, mentally competent adults to seek medical help to end their lives. It will now be scrutinised by the Scottish Parliament ahead of a final vote. Well, supporters believe the bill will ease the suffering of dying Scots, while opponents argue it will fail to safeguard some of the most vulnerable people in society. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury spoke to two people given months to live with opposing views on assisted dying.
I would like to have the choice that at a time and place of my choosing, when death is close, to be able to take something to hasten my death.
There could be a cure for what you and I have got, but we just don't know about it.
There are amazing
So you
medical
don't know what
advances.
miracle is just around the corner, and if you commit suicide, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity.
Being able to let go, to feel safe.
Once you've drunk that, my friend, you cannot change your mind. What
For
about the poor
everyone,
suckers
isn't
who are there with you? They've got to
The
live
poor-
with the fact that you died, and they let you.
My daughters are completely supportive of assisted dying.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
This is an absolute decision about myself. It's not about other people with terminal or life-limiting disease. It's certainly not about people with disabilities.
It's financial. You can save millions of pounds by getting people to bump themselves off.
And you can watch the full version of that report online throughout the day here on Sky News. Well, let's take you through some other stories making headlines this morning for you. And a former girlfriend of rapper Sean Diddy Combs has told his sex trafficking and racketeering trial that he beat her frequently. The R&B singer Cassie Ventura, who will return to court today, also said that his drug-fuelled sex parties made her stomach churn. Cassie is due back in court today, and Combs denies the charges. The Conservative MP, Patrick Spencer, has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault, which are alleged to have happened at London's Groucho Club. Mr Spencer, who represents Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, is accused of 2 separate incidents involving 2 women in August 2023. He says he categorically denies the charges. And social media platforms are failing to protect women and girls from harm at every stage. This is according to new research from children's charity NSPCC. To prove it, they created fake profiles of a teenage girl across different social platforms and found all were exposed to grooming, harassment and abuse.
Now, Eric and Lyle Menendez, 2 brothers serving time in a California jail for the murder of their parents in 1989, have been given a fresh chance at freedom. Well, Ashna's here to tell us more about this. And Ashna, this story has always captured the imagination, but particularly in recent years as well, with a big TV drama. Talk us through the scale of surprise or expectation on them getting this second chance.
I think there will be a huge amount of surprise no matter which side of the debate you stand. And you're right that this has totally reignited the public's fascination with this, given recent adaptations into the case of these 2 brothers. Lyle and Eric were both sentenced to life without parole after the brutal murder of their parents in 1989 at their Beverly Hills home. And at the time, they were 21 and 18 years old. They are now in their 50s. And the prosecution at the time had argued that this was a brutal, calculated attack, that this was something that they did in order to gain access to a hefty inheritance. But the brothers' defence had always argued that this was never about the money. This was a reaction to emotional and sexual abuse that they suffered at the hands of their father. Last year, as I say, and as you mentioned, there were a number of adaptations which reignited this debate. The LA District Attorney last year was asked for them to reconsider, to change the sentence to 50 years to life. This, by the way, is all the family members who are going into court yesterday, because yesterday a judge did just that, reduce the sentence, paving the way for the brothers to gain access to parole, but also for possible release too. But it's not his decision whether they will actually be released. That's something for the State Parole Board to consider.
Really fascinating, Ash. Thanks so much. Right, it's time now to talk to the government. Delighted to say that we're joined by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the Cabinet Minister, Pat McFadden. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks for joining us. First up, we wanted to get your reaction to Sam Washington's exclusive interview with Mark Carney this morning. Here is an extract of him talking about the UK's decision to grant Donald Trump a second state visit.
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
Is that a bit rich of the new Prime Minister from Canada to say that, when I guess the UK has been quite clearly supporting Canada over the last couple of months?
No, I wouldn't say that. Look, we're very pleased that there's going to be a second state visit from President Trump. Every country has to decide how it conducts its own relations with other countries. For us, the United States relationship is really important. It's a very long friendship. We've conducted a very good deal with the United States just last week, which has saved thousands of jobs in the UK automotive industry. I'm a West Midlands MP. The automotive industry, companies like Jaguar Land Rover, absolutely crucial to the economy in my region. So we want a positive relationship with the United States to sell them great products like Range Rovers and so on. So every country has to choose its own path. But I should also say our relationship and friendship with Canada is really important too. My wife's Canadian. We're partly Canadian family. It's a really important friendship between the United Kingdom and Canada too.
Are you not disappointed then that Mr. Carney criticised you for that offer to President Trump?
No, we've got free speech in the world. Prime Minister Carney is entitled to his view, and he's got to decide how Canada conducts its relationships with the United States. And by the same token, so do we. So I'm completely relaxed about the comments, but I'm glad that President Trump is coming on a state visit, and I'm particularly glad that we've conducted a trade deal that saves thousands of automotive jobs in this country and is a platform for future trade which can benefit the United Kingdom economically more in the future too.
Last question on this. I don't want to ask if your wife would share his point of view, but can you understand Carney's point of view on this?
Look, I think the relationship between Canada and the United States is slightly different. It's so close there. Anyone familiar with Canada will know that. There's a lot of cross-border trade and traffic. It's a very integrated economy. I think the comments about the 51st state have not gone down well in Canada, and that's understandable. Canada's a fiercely proud, independent nation. So I understand why Canadians feel as they do. But as I said, every country has to conduct its own relationships with the United States and any other country as it sees fit.
Obviously, you're joining us from Manchester. The reason being you're moving a huge number of jobs, government jobs, to regions around the UK, out of London. Why are you doing that?
Well, it's a great opportunity. I believe that the civil service needs to change in a number of ways. I want to have a civil service which has a footprint, if you like, in different parts of the country. I don't believe all the jobs, particularly all the senior jobs, have to be located in central London. I also want to open up the recruitment. We're announcing a new apprenticeship programme to get school leavers into the civil service. I want to see a civil service that's contributing economically to cities like Manchester, Glasgow, Aberdeen, different places around the country. There's always been some civil service jobs outside London, perhaps in the odd HMRC office here and there and so on. What we're doing is bringing them together into themed campuses where we can really get a deep possession of skills, for example, IT and tech here in Manchester. And I think it's a great opportunity. Let's look forward to a civil service that speaks with all the accents of the country, not just one, that opens up its recruitment to people from different backgrounds, and that can give the opportunity of good jobs and career progression to people without always having to move to central London if they get promoted. That's what we want to do, and that's part of what we're announcing today.
Clearly, costs are lower outside of London, and so are wages. If an existing member of the civil service moves with the same job, do they have to take a pay cut, or is it only lower wages for new hires in those regions?
Well, they might lose their London weighting, but they probably benefit from cheaper property prices. I think the career opportunities for working in a good civil service job somewhere here in Manchester or a similar city are really good. But you're right that cost savings are part of this. We estimate that we will save £94 million on leasing costs by reducing the headcount in London by about 12,000 over the next few years. So we can pay less for property in somewhere like Manchester than we do in London. We can have good jobs here. And what I also want to see, and this is an important point of this, is career progression. One of the things civil servants have said to us is, well, maybe I can get a job there, but I can't get promoted. I can't climb the ladder. So my direction and my instruction to the civil service is make sure you have a career path where someone can get promoted when they're working outside London, not just get an entry-level job too.
I know your Cabinet Office colleague, Nick Thomas-Symonds, has been working hard on the new terms of trade and all things with the EU. Some talk that Gibraltar or EU youth mobility have thrown a little bit of a spanner in the works there. Are we still set for an announcement on May the 19th?
We've got an important meeting coming up on May the 19th, and if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture here, we've conducted a trade deal with India. We've conducted the trade deal we spoke about a moment ago with the United States, and we think we can improve the agreement with the European Union too. Some of these things have been talked about for years, but they haven't been achieved. But we've achieved two really important deals in the last couple of weeks, and we think we can make improvements to the European deal too. You're right, my colleague Nick Thomas-Symonds leads on this. He's working really hard. And if we get a better arrangement with the European Union, then we'll see economic benefits from that, just as we will from the deal we've conducted with the United States and the one with India too.
Obviously, the deal with the US is a sort of first step. Is what you're going to announce next week with the EU a full-fledged, fully agreed deal?
Not yet, because we're still working on it. And I think, you know, all these things are ongoing, but the May the 19th meeting focuses minds. It gives us a deadline to work to. I think that helps in these negotiations. So I'm hoping that we'll see improvements to the Brexit deal we negotiated a few years ago that make life a bit easier for British business, that make life a bit easier for our exporters, and that give us an economic boost, because that's what we need.
Just finally, if I can quickly, when you look back on the immigration announcement, do you think there's lessons to learn on exactly the wording, the rhetoric that was used?
I think we should focus on the policy, and you know, my reflection on the past few days is immigration's contributed a huge amount to the UK. It will in the future, but I think the public wants a sense of rules around it. That's what the Prime Minister was speaking about. But the UK will always be home to people of talent from around the globe. That's done us good. It will continue to do us good in the future. But let's have a proper sense of rules around it. And I think that's the better way to conduct the policy. And that's at the heart of the immigration white paper that the government published a couple of days ago.
Pat McFadden, great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to play more of that exclusive interview with Mark Carney, carried out by Sam Washington, specifically focusing on what he said about trade. We'll discuss it with Sam in Ottawa and with former Trade Commissioner Mr. Falconer here in London.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up in just a moment, we'll have more on that exclusive interview with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, specifically his comments on trade. But first, all of the top stories this morning.
Thank you, Wilfred. So, in his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians weren't impressed by Sir Keir Starmer's decision to invite Donald Trump on a second state visit to the UK.
It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
At least 18 people have been killed and 70 others injured in an Israeli strike on a hospital in Gaza. Israel claimed it had targeted a Hamas command centre beneath the site in Khan Yunis. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there's no way Israel will stop the war until Hamas is defeated. A judge in California has reduced the Menendez brothers' murder sentences, meaning they could be eligible for parole. Eric and La Menendez received life sentences after being convicted of murder of their parents, as Jose and Kitty, in 1989. The brothers maintain that they acted out of self-defence after years of abuse. And the Royal College of Psychiatrists has pulled its support for the assisted dying bill. MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. It comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland passed the first stage at Hollywood.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much. Well, just in a moment, we're going to discuss at length Canada's Prime Minister's comments and how it relates to trade. As you can see, Sir Crawford Falconer is here, and so is Mari. But first and foremost, let's bring in Sam Washington in Ottawa, of course, who carried out that interview with Mark Carney. Sam, great to have you back on this. What were the sort of key takeaways from Mark Carney when it came to trade? They're in a really tough position, much more so than we ever were.
Yeah, clearly, Wilf, it was a big chunk of what I wanted to talk to the Prime Minister about. And I opened that section of the interview by saying, you know, we've had a deal announced for the UK. We've had one for China. You've been to the Oval Office. Why don't you have anything to show for it? Well, his response to that was that what the UK had and what China had were not full-throated deals. He said that what China had was nothing resembling a deal. It was just a temporary pause in some of the tariffs that was going to last 90 days. And he was saying that there clearly needed to be a lot more work done in that trading relationship. Then when I asked him about the UK, and I said to him, you know, wouldn't sectors, you know, particularly your automotive, your steel, your aluminium sector, wouldn't they have preferred something like what the UK's got, even if it's a partial trading arrangement, as you describe it? And he didn't explicitly say that it was a bad deal for the UK, but he kept coming back to the fact that it was partial, and also saying that it was so limited in scope that for an economy like Canada's that's so deeply integrated with the US economy, and you know, just like the automotive sector, so much bigger than the UK, that it just wasn't appropriate to think that they were going to get any kind of deal like that across the line in one meeting.
Well, let's listen to an extract of your interview, Sam, with Mark Carney.
Starmer did get an agreement on steel, aluminium and cars. Wouldn't Canadian businesses in those sectors welcome that?
Well, we don't want an agreement that allows us to ship 100,000 cars to the United States when we ship over 1.5 million cars to the United States. Okay. So we are in a different order of magnitude in terms of integration and scale of the relationship than the United Kingdom, with all due respect. It's a totally different world. Okay. The level of trade with the world's largest economy. We are the largest trading partner of the world's largest economy.
Sam, I wonder what he's planning to do next. And of course, interestingly, one of the most combative relationships, US versus China, has itself led to a way out.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, because the Canadian and US economies are so deeply integrated, I think that these conversations are going to need several more goes at to arrive at a mutually beneficial, hopefully to both sides, agreement. Mark Carney was also very keen to talk about the G7, and I think his intention is at that meeting to really try and galvanise sides, because he said basically the US has been the anchor of the world trading system, and they've basically just removed themselves from the equation. And if they can't be reliable partners, then we're going to be looking for other reliable partners at that G7, and we're going to be forming our own alliances.
Great stuff, Sam. Again, congrats on a wonderful interview. More of it to come throughout the day here on Sky News. Let's discuss it all with Sir Crawford Falconer, former UK Chief Trade Negotiator. Mari's here as well. Sir Crawford, thanks so much for joining us. Does Mark Carney have a lot of cards to play here, or is he as boxed in as, I guess, Prime Minister Starmer was?
I think he's in a very different situation, and he's got difficulties, but they're different difficulties. I mean, he has, as he alluded to in that clip, a deeply integrated relationship with the US and to some extent with Mexico directly as well. So he's actually, because he has an existing trade agreement with Trump, he's in a different situation to the UK for that reason too. He's actually, most of that trade agreement still applies. On autos it doesn't apply. They still have measures applied, but he's got preferential access for a lot of stuff. But he's got a big problem in his key sectors. But he has leverage because the big three automakers have similar interests to him. But that's his big problem, is in autos. I mean, he's got lots of other problems as well, like the rest of us have. But, you know, he's integrated there in the same way that we were integrated with the EU prior to Brexit. So if you're looking for a comparison, that's more of the comparison you need to look at.
It's interesting what you brought up there about he has an existing agreement. He has the USMCA, which was negotiated by Trump in his first term as a sort of fresher take on NAFTA. I mean, to what extent does that raise the key question that many people have of whatever deal any country makes with the United States, particularly with Donald Trump, might be renegotiated again in months or years?
Oh, exactly. I mean, there's no question about that. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to get relief from damage to your economy, you just say, well, OK, I've got to take that chance. Now, it's true that with MCA, he reneged on MCA, which is the agreement with Canada and Mexico, in some respects, and he has on autos, he's still fiddling with the rules. But large chunks of that agreement still apply. You know, like 98% or something of Canada's trade occurs under that agreement and still is duty-free under that agreement, provided they meet what are called the rules of origin. So, yes, he's kind of broken it on the stuff that's really big, like autos, but they do have a bit of a fallback. So, no, I mean, this is a different Trump second time around, and you have to have always a degree of uncertainty now, but I can understand why you take a decision to do a deal if it gets you benefits in the meantime, and you deal with reneging in the future if you have to.
8 out of 10 for us, Sir Crawford, the US-UK deal.
I could repeat the view that a famous Chinese politician said about the French Revolution, which is, what do you make of the French Revolution? He said, well, it's a bit early to tell. I mean, in a certain sense, this agreement's like that. What it is what I would say is a narrow arrangement. I wouldn't even classify it as a free trade agreement as such. But it is true that both sides are claiming that they're going to use this to go further. So it may well be that it does go further and looks more like a normal free trade agreement. At the moment, it's what I would call pain relief. So if it was a free trade agreement, it wouldn't pass the test for a free trade agreement. But as pain relief for the auto sector, it does that job. The real question is, are both sides serious about doing a proper trade negotiation that's genuinely liberalises? I mean, all we're doing at the moment is going back to something, not even completely back, to something that's a little better than the immediacy of Liberation Day, so-called Liberation Day tariffs. And that's sensible, as Pat McFadden has referred to earlier. But, you know, that doesn't qualify as a free trade agreement yet.
What do you make it so far of Starmer's ability to negotiate these trade deals? Obviously, you've talked about the US one. We've had the one with India as well. Do you think he's doing a decent job on some of these negotiations? Is it looking positive, or do you think perhaps he needs to be bolder?
Look, I think it's positive. I mean, in many ways, it's a shame for the Indian agreement that it's kind of got knocked off the headlines because of what happened with the US. That is a genuine free trade agreement. It's a trade agreement with the world's sixth largest economy. They'll probably jump over us and become the fifth largest economy if they haven't done so already. And they'll soon be the world's third largest economy. Makes a lot of sense to do that. Now, that's an agreement that's been in gestation for 3 years. So therefore, you know, the incoming government inherited a pre-existing negotiation, but it's seen that it's worthwhile to do that. And so therefore, I think that's a sign that they are committed to the ongoing trade negotiations program. Now, there will be other of those agreements coming down the pipe as well. So I think the UK has the option, and I see every reason they want to exercise it, of continuing to liberalise with other economies. So it's not just about the US, and it's not just about Europe, it's also about the growing parts of the rest of the world.
UK-India deal, rate that out of 10 for us. Good deal?
Well, I'd say, as a deal with India, I'd give it 8 out of 10. I mean, as an agreement with a normal developed economy, no, you'd probably, you know, my guess is, because I haven't seen the detail, that, you know, you'd probably be lower than that for that agreement. But the reality is with India, you're not dealing with an Australia, a New Zealand, a Canada. You're dealing with a rapidly developing economy. So there'll be imperfections in it. But I think strategically, you would rate it 8 out of 10.
In terms of what's coming with the EU, we're all on tenterhooks for next week. Do you think that there is scope for something drastically different than would have been when you were in place? Not because you've changed in your position, but because the government has changed. Was there a sort of sense with EU negotiations that they didn't want to deal or give a win to the party in government that they viewed as being responsible for Brexit? Or is it much more simple than that? That the same options will be on the table as there were a year or two ago?
Look, you know, as always, I'll say what I don't know, and I don't know. I do have the feeling that from the EU side, there's a greater warmth and greater interest in being constructive with the current government. But it's not clear to me just what that means in practice, and therefore what kinds of genuine concessions at this stage they would be willing to give to the UK. You know, it's in the EU's interest to have a better phytosanitary deal with the UK because their exporters will benefit from it. It's obviously in their interest to have some form of a youth mobility scheme. And so therefore, at least in those two areas, they would presumably want a deal. If they could get a deal on fish, I'm sure they'd want a deal on fish. So there always were areas where the EU wanted something. The real question is, are they prepared to give the UK things that we want that really change the dial? Are they prepared to do significant things on services liberalisation for the UK? I've seen no evidence of that. You would think that that would be touted. Now, it may well be that there is some degree of breakthrough on that in the discussions, but I have a feeling that there'll be some things that won't necessarily change the dial, and there'll be an indication that there's progress on others, which the detail will come later. But I've got no way of really knowing.
We're expecting that May the 19th. Will you come back on May the 20th and discuss it with us? It'd be great to have you then.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to.
Quick final question. US-China. Has US blinked? Has China blinked? Have they both been forced by the markets to blink? What's happened?
Yeah, I think they've both been forced by reality. They've both come to terms with reality. That, I mean, these two economies could not basically embargo each other for very long without the consequences domestically and for the rest of the world being pretty serious. So they've stepped back from that. But, you know, they haven't done a deal. I mean, you know, at the moment, for instance, the US, they haven't done a deal in the sense they've stepped back from the insanity of their respective positions, really excessive insanity. But, you know, the US still will apply 30% tariffs to China at the moment. But that's on top of probably an average of 20% on tariffs that already existed prior to Trump taking the decisions that he did earlier. So, you know, roughly speaking, the US has probably got around about a 50% tariff against China already. Grosso modo, and on things like electric vehicles, they've got a 100% tariff. They've still got the 25% tariff on steel. So, you know, there's still major barriers, and there's still a long way from what you would call, you know, a genuine negotiated deal. So they've got plenty of work to do.
Sir Crawford, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. We'll see you next week. Much appreciated. Two pieces of breaking news to bring to you. We've been reporting this morning on Israeli strikes on hospitals in Gaza. Well, in the last few minutes, Reuters has reported that Israel has issued evacuation orders for 3 ports in Yemen, which strongly suggests that military action will follow. We'll keep you updated on that and watch it carefully. A different bit of breaking news on the economy. Fashion brand Burberry has announced it could cut around 1,700 roles worldwide over the next couple of years as part of plans to reduce costs. We'll get you more on that too when we have it. In the meantime, we're going to have a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, how do you deal with dodgy builders? We'll discuss.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Premier League running is live on USA and streaming on Peacock. Only 2 matches remain.
The climax of the Premier League season.
Friday, exclusively on Peacock. Top 5 hopeful Chelsea host Man United. Sunday on USA. Newcastle continue to fight for Champions League qualification when they visit Arsenal. This is the Premier League run-in. Live on USA and Peacock.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for death. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Victoria joins us on set now because we're going to talk about experts warning about the dangerous impacts of heat waves on pregnant women and newborn babies in the UK. So what are we being told here? Because obviously when you are pregnant, any extra heat is quite dangerous, but this is happening more and more.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a really understudied area of science. We know a lot more about the impact of heat on babies They're small, so they heat up quickly. It's very dangerous for them. There hasn't been, relatively speaking, all that much research on how heat impacts women, but that is changing very quickly as we get more hot weather. What we've learned today is that the number of days in the UK that are hot enough that pose a risk to pregnant women are double that because of climate change than they would be had the world not warmed. Now, you're probably wondering what counts as hot enough to be a danger to women. The definition varies by region, but it's when it is sort of extremely much hotter than most of the temperatures in the region. It's quite complicated to explain, but effectively it's most acute within the UK and east of England, and further abroad it's more acute in places where the climate has changed a lot or where people don't have such good access to healthcare. But I spoke to one mother yesterday who, after she had given birth, temperatures in her postnatal ward were 30 degrees. And she said this really brought home to her the fact that the climate was changing here and how it impacts her when it can feel like quite a distant problem.
Joy, thank you so much for that. We're going to go into a bit more detail next hour, but for now, thanks so much. Almost half of UK adults wrongly believe builders are licensed, according to a new survey. The Homeowners Alliance and the Federation of Master Builders also found that 2/3 of homeowners incorrectly expect builders to have insurance to cover accidental damage.
Yeah, joining us now is Mary Lutkins, who fell victim to unregulated builders when she decided to get a house extension done. And Brian Berry, who's the Chief Executive of the Federation of Master Builders. Thanks for joining us both today. Mary, let's start with you then. Just give us the background to what happened to you.
The background is that I needed an extension done to my home because I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2016. I ill health retired from my career in 2021. And I needed an extension, obviously a ground floor bathroom and a larger kitchen to future-proof my house, basically. I went via a trusted trader site to find a builder, and unfortunately I fell victim to a rogue trader. He told me he was insured, all his work would be covered by insurance, etc., should anything go wrong. And there wasn't really any background checks you could do. I trusted 100% the site that I submitted the inquiry through for the builder.
But Brian, what is your take on this? And tell us about some of the details in the survey you've taken. Where ultimately does responsibility lie for these sort of due diligence process with workers, though, you know, the terrible situation that poor Mary had to go through?
Yeah, well, I think Mary's situation highlights a problem that's sadly all too common, because the problem in this country is that anyone can call themselves a builder. There is no form of licensing or registration of domestic building companies, which is a major problem because consumers often think there is some form of licensing, as revealed in our report with the Homeowners Alliance, but that's not the case. Homeowners are very much exposed by going to on-site recommendations for builders who may not have the recognised competence to do the work. And sometimes there are rogue traders who are there just to exploit consumers. This is a situation that really puts off a lot of homeowners. We know that 1/3 of homeowners are put off having work done because they don't know who to trust. And so what we need in this country, and it's something that the Federation of Master Builders is calling for, is a licensing scheme for all domestic building companies to make sure that the builders doing the work are competent, and for consumers to have trust, and if it goes wrong, there is redress.
Two questions, Brian, on that. I mean, construction is pretty slow in this country, probably largely because of regulation and planning permissions, and that's a sort of issue for the government. But adding more regulation, is that the answer? Is that something that builders want to see happen? And I guess added to that, websites in the meantime where at least people can leave their points of view towards individual workers. Are they not welcome short of getting to a point where you have these new licenses?
I think the on-site reviews are not always totally trustworthy because if, the problem is ongoing. These sites have been available for many years, but it's very hard to know how trustworthy they are. What we need, and it's something that's supported by the majority of members of the Federation of Master Builders, 86% of my members support licensing, because good builders have got nothing to fear from licensing. It just stamps out those who are trying to make a fast buck. So good builders are wanting to be recognised as competent. It will give consumers greater assurance, and it will mean that actually we attract more people into our industry because we'll have a regulated industry that actually commits itself to health and safety standards and provides ongoing training. And these are the things which are in some quarters lacking. We need to professionalise our industry, and most good builders recognise that and support our licensing scheme, which would benefit the industry and consumers alike.
Brian and Mary, we thank you both for joining us. I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you for sharing your story. We're out of time here on Sky News Breakfast for this hour. We'll be back with all of the day's top stories after this.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. In his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney tells Sky News Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump.
Government tells this programme we have free speech in the world and Mr Carney is entitled to his view.
And also ahead, how climate change is turning up the heat for expectant mothers.
It's Wednesday, the 14th of May. Your headlines. Canada's new Prime Minister says the UK's offer of a second state visit to Donald Trump cuts across Ottawa's efforts to defend their sovereignty.
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance.
Canada's Prime Minister has also called on the King to help.
Also ahead, Israel calls at least 18 people in strikes on 2 hospitals in Gaza and issues evacuation warnings to 3 ports in Yemen. A chance of freedom for the Menendez brothers after 35 years in jail for killing their parents in a crime that captivated America. And we've got a special report with 2 terminally ill adults on opposing sides of the assisted dying debate.
This is an absolute decision about myself.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year I should be dead.
Very good morning to you. We start with a big exclusive today. In his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump. He said the UK's offer of an unprecedented second state visit to the US president cut across the clear messages Canada was sending to the White House to defend their sovereignty. Government Minister Pat McFadden told this programme in the last hour he understands why Canadians feel as they do. More on that in just a moment. But first, here is Sam Washington's report.
Mark Carney sworn in as Canada's Prime Minister for the second time this year. An improbable election victory made possible in part by Donald Trump's threats. Having campaigned on a message that America wanted to break Canada in order to own it, the former Bank of England governor has called on his king for help.
His Majesty coming sends a message first and foremost to Canadians. All issues around Canadian sovereignty have been accentuated by the president. So, no, it's not coincidental.
And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King.
It follows Sir Keir Starmer personally handing a letter of invitation from the King to the President for an unprecedented second UK state visit.
What did Canadians make of that?
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
So do you personally think that a state visit to the UK for President Trump is appropriate, given that backdrop?
Well, that's a judgment for the government of the United Kingdom and the palace.
I'm sure you have an opinion.
Well, you reference, I have an opinion on many things, some of which I keep to myself.
The King is going to sit here alongside the Queen. It'll be the first time in nearly 50 years that the head of state will open Parliament here in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister is clear that it is an assertion of Canadian sovereignty, made all the more important because of Donald Trump's threats.
Despite his campaign rhetoric never to meet the president while he disrespected Canada, Carney's first visit since re-election was to the White House.
Why did you meet him?
He was expressing a desire. He wasn't calling, he'd shifted from the expectation to a desire for that to happen. He was also coming from a place where he recognized that wasn't going to happen. I made it clear to him.
Do you think that he ever intended to annex Canada?
There's wish and reality. Did he want to? Did it look like an attractive combination to him? Yes. Does he still muse about it? Perhaps. Is it ever going to happen? No, never.
With Ukraine's sovereignty also imperiled, Trump has positioned himself as peacemaker-in-chief.
Do you trust that he's an honest broker in that regard, in representing the interests of Ukraine, Europe and the West?
I do. A straight answer, I do. The positions of Canada, the UK, all the coalition, the willing, Ukraine, and the United States are converging towards this unconditional 30-day ceasefire demand of Russia. So the president has been helpful.
Mark Carney will be hoping Trump's help extends a little closer to home if he's to deliver for Canadians. Samantha Washington, Sky News in Ottawa.
Fascinating interview there Sam did with Mark Carney. Mari's here to discuss the UK implications. But first, let's just listen into what Pat McFadden had to say in response earlier on the programme.
Now we've got free speech in the world. Prime Minister Carney is entitled to his view, and he's got to decide how Canada conducts its relationships with the United States. And by the same token, so do we. So I'm completely relaxed about the comments, but I'm glad that President Trump is coming on a state visit, and I'm particularly glad that we've conducted a trade deal that saves thousands of automotive jobs in this country and is a platform for future trade which can benefit the United Kingdom economically more in the future too.
Pat McFadden earlier, I mean, I thought he did a very good job in trying to weave between keeping both countries on side. Yeah. But it does bring back the focus, as did our interview with Crawford Falconer, about who's getting the most out of this, being aggressive with Trump or confrontational or being conciliatory.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the UK being pulled in different directions almost at the moment. I mean, Pat McFadden, as you say, he did a great job at showing he was completely relaxed about those comments. Nothing to see here. Everyone's entitled to their view. Everyone needs to chill out. That was the kind of tone coming from Pat McFadden. And really that's because they don't want to be kind of fanning the flames of any level of or whiff of division. They want to show that they can be friends with the US and Canada, just like they keep denying that they are going to be pulled in different directions between the US and the EU. And this is often the case with not just the UK, just as what happens in a globalised economy, where you often have different conflicting views and everybody wants a little piece at the same time. And it's about making sure that you find a way to diplomatically keep friends with as many people as possible, but then also extract strategically what you need from each nation when it comes to trading relationships and things like that. And therefore, Pat McFadden just said, oh, you know, we've got free speech in this country. To an extent, that felt like a little bit of a nod to the US, the Trump administration. We know how much they love to talk about free speech and kind of saying, you know, we're on Trump's side when it comes to free speech, but nonetheless, we love Canada all the same.
Albeit the US seems to think at the moment that we don't have free speech, so there's another sort of complicated leg to that particular argument. Mike, great stuff, as always. More to come as well from the Carney interview throughout the day. Time to get you up to speed on all the day's other stories. Leah's got that for us.
Thanks, Wilfred. Israel has killed at least 18 people in a strike on a hospital in Gaza. The Israeli military has also issued evacuation orders for 3 ports in Yemen. Let's go live to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Alistair, bring viewers up to date. What's the latest in Gaza that we're hearing?
Well, there's been heavy attacks over the last 24 hours. Early yesterday morning, a hospital, the Nasser hospital, was hit. At least 2 people killed, including a Palestinian journalist in that attack. And then late yesterday evening, the pictures you're seeing here was the attack on the European hospital, not far away, both of the hospitals being in Khan Yunis. And, you know, that series of kind of explosions and the smoke rising, the IDF saying they were attacking an underground complex that was a Hamas command and control center. And we're told that they had intelligence that Mohammed Sinwar was there. Mohammed Sinwar, the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar, who was the leader of Hamas, killed last October. Mohammed assumed the role of leading Hamas within Gaza itself. Hamas say that he wasn't there. He is still alive. The IDF haven't confirmed one way or another, but at least 18 people killed in that strike on that hospital, and a lot of the hospital also very badly damaged. On top of the fact they have been living through almost 19 months of war, and medical supplies are running dangerously low.
Alistair, while you're here, the Israeli military issuing evacuation orders for 3 ports in Yemen. What do we know there?
Yeah, this was in the last few minutes. I suspect that is in response to some Houthi attacks that have been coming in here over the last 12 hours. about 8 o'clock yesterday evening, there were air raid sirens across central Israel, including here in Jerusalem, as a ballistic missile was fired towards the area. And then again this morning, about 7:30 this morning, more air raid sirens. So a number of Houthi attacks, which I think is probably what has prompted Israel. Well, they look as though they're about to take action in Yemen. Of course, we know that the Americans have pulled back from that. They've struck a deal with the Houthis, so the Americans are no longer attacking them, and the Houthis say that they won't attack Red Sea shipping, but the Houthis have said they will continue attacking Israel as long as the war in Gaza continues, and that is exactly what they've been doing over the last couple of days.
All right, Alistair, thanks so much. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has pulled its support for the assisted dying bill. MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. It comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland passed the first stage at Holyrood. So 70 MSPs back the bill, which would allow terminally ill, mentally competent adults to seek medical help to end their lives. It will now be scrutinised by the Scottish Parliament ahead of a final vote. Well, supporters believe the bill will ease the suffering of dying Scots, while opponents argue it would fail to safeguard some of the most vulnerable people in society. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury spoke to two people, both given months to live, with opposing views on assisted dying.
I would like to have the choice that at a time and place of my choosing, when death is close, to be able to take something to hasten my death.
There could be a cure for what you and I have got, but we just don't know about it.
There are amazing
So you
medical
don't know what
advances.
miracle is just around the corner, and if you commit suicide, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity.
Being able to let go, to feel safe.
Once you've drunk that, my friend, you cannot change your mind. What
For
about the poor
everyone,
suckers
isn't
who are there with you? They've got to live with the fact that you died, and they let you.
My daughters are completely supportive of assisted dying.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
This is an absolute decision about myself. It's not about other people with terminal or life-limiting disease. It's certainly not about people with disabilities.
It's financial. You can save millions of pounds by getting people to bump themselves off.
And you can watch the full version of that report online throughout the day here on Sky News. Well, let's take you through some of the day's other stories. Making headlines this morning, and a former girlfriend of rapper Sean Diddy Combs has told his sex trafficking and racketeering trial that he beat her up frequently. The R&B singer Cassie Ventura, who will return to court today, also said that his drug-fueled sex parties made her stomach churn. R&B singer Cassie Ventura is due back in court today, and Combs denies the charges. The Conservative MP Patrick Spencer has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault, which are alleged to have happened at London's Groucho Club. Mr Spencer, who represents Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, is accused of 2 separate incidents involving 2 women in August 2023. He says he categorically denies the charges. And Burberry will cut up to 1,700 jobs worldwide. It's part of efforts to slash costs and return the British fashion brand to profit. The firm now says it wants to save £100 million by the year 2027.
Yeah, great stuff, thank you. Eric and Lyle Menendez, 2 brothers serving time in a California jail for the murder of their parents in 1989, have been given a fresh chance at freedom. Let's bring in Ashna, who's got more details on this. Ashna, a lot of people will know about this story, but not everyone. So bring us up to speed on what happened initially and this new development.
Well, it's very rare, as you say, that courtrooms turn into cultural conversation. But in 1989, this was the biggest murder case of its time because Lyle and Eric Menendez murdered their parents, Jose and Kitty, at their Beverly Hills home in 1989. The brothers at the time were 21 years old. This is them, and 18 at the time. They're now in their 50s because they've served 35 years behind bars. And they were sentenced at the time to life without parole. The prosecution argued that this was a brutal murder, that it was calculated, that they wanted to gain access to a multi-million-pound inheritance. But the brothers have always said, and their defence counsel have always said, this is never about the money. This was the reaction to years of emotional and sexual abuse at the hands of their father. Now, last year, it reignited public fascination when an LA district attorney was asked to change their sentence from life without a chance for parole to 50 years to life. And last year, and yesterday, a judge did just that, paving the way for the brothers to now get access to parole and possibly even release. It was an extraordinary day in court yesterday. You had the brothers' family members, relatives in the court, essentially telling the judge that they supported their release. We heard from the brothers themselves via statements. Some of the relatives said they are universally forgiven by our family. And during that resentencing decision, which in itself is extraordinary, by the judge, he said, "I'm not saying they should be released. It's not for me to decide. I do believe they've done enough," he said, in the past 35 years, that they should get that chance. It's not his decision. It's going to now go to the State Parole Board for that decision to be made.
Ashton, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Now, back here in the UK, Peter Sullivan has been freed from prison after serving 38 years for a murder he didn't commit. The case is thought to be the longest-running miscarriage of justice in British legal history. Greg Milam reports for us from the Court of Appeal.
It's taken nearly 4 decades, but Peter Sullivan finally left prison a free man. Not angry, he said, not bitter, just ready to live out the rest of his life in peace. It is a constant reminder for the people of Merseyside, a memorial to Diane Sindel, it says, and all of our sisters who've been raped and murdered. It is nearly 39 years since Diane's body was found in an alleyway nearby. Her killing still haunts people here. A 21-year-old, soon to be married, and killed with such brutality in the middle of town. She left her part-time job at this pub on the Wirral. What happened to her led to the biggest murder investigation Merseyside police had ever launched. 8 weeks later, police arrested unemployed labourer Peter Sullivan. Now, 38 years after he was convicted, that conviction's been quashed. It's thought to be the longest miscarriage of justice in British history. New tests of DNA evidence showed someone else was the killer.
In the light of that fresh evidence, we allow the appeal on ground 1. We quash the conviction.
Peter Sullivan listened to that on a video link, his family expressing their relief.
We haven't won, Peter hasn't won, and neither is the Sindel family. They've lost their daughter, they're not going to get her back. We've got Peter back, and now we've got to try and build a life around him again. So at the end of the day, we feel sorry for the Sindels, and it's such a shame that all this has had to happen in the first place.
He didn't know which way this was going. He's now got to come out. He's going to find things so different when he gets out here. He's got a long way to go.
On Merseyside, it's brought up memories, not least for those questioned in the original investigation.
Well, he did those inquiries, and he came to me, where were you on such and such a date? And I said, I don't know. And then, of course, different police came in to interview. But in fairness, they have to turn, every stone, don't they?
Merseyside police have now reopened the investigation.
There's clearly a lot of work to do now in continuing those advancements in DNA. If that person whose profile we're seeking to identify is deceased, we want to identify that because we clearly want to seek justice for Diane.
Justice for Peter Sullivan has taken nearly 4 decades to come. The search for justice for Diane Sindel goes on. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Well, that story features prominently on today's front pages. The Metro saying, "I'm not angry, I'm not bitter," as it covers that conviction being quashed for Peter Sullivan. The Daily Mail also reports on the story. Its headline, 38 years in jail for a murder he didn't commit. The FT going with the UK's trade deal with America, discussing that and mentioning China as well. Right, let's move on to the Eye. New migrant rules boost UK hopes for a softer Brexit deal, offsetting, of course, some of the migration deal of late. Right, let's move on to further stories. And Liz got that for us.
Thanks so much. So experts are warning about the dangers of the impact of heat waves on pregnant women and newborn babies in the UK. Climate reporter Victoria Seabrook joins us. So what's this all about? What do we know? I've not heard about this before.
Yeah, it's quite an understudied area of science, somewhat surprisingly. We know quite a bit about the impact of heat on babies. It's really dangerous for them. They're small, so they heat up quickly. The impacts of women have been studied less. What we do know is that in the UK, heat exposure does increase the risk of premature births. Studies elsewhere in the world have linked heat exposure with stillbirths, babies being born underweight, gestational diabetes, high blood pressure, difficulties breastfeeding. So quite concerning things, although scientists do stress a lot more research still is needed. What we've learned today is that the number of days in the UK where it gets hot enough that pregnant women are at risk are double now what they would be in a cooler climate. So because the climate is getting hotter, we're having twice the number. Now, there's not a specific temperature number that's universal. It's across the world or even across regions. In the UK, it's relative. But in the UK, it's most acute in the east of England, and globally, it's more acute where the climate is changing more or where the health systems are very different, perhaps where people don't have such good access to care. But I spoke to one mother yesterday who gave birth in a hospital in the UK 2 years ago, and she said that temperatures inside the ward after she'd given birth reached 30 degrees, which was very distressing. And all of this has raised yet more concerns and warnings that our ageing hospital buildings are not very well designed to cope with heat. Sometimes the windows don't open, there's a shortage of fans, there's not always air conditioning, things like that. The government has said that it has committed £1 billion to help update the hospital estate, including adapting to things like heat. But certainly I think this is something that we're going to hear more and more about.
In terms of the doubling of the days, what does that go from and to?
From 13 to 26. So we're getting, on average, 26 a year across the UK. And what the scientists did is they compared that with a sort of simulated alternative reality. Had the climate not warmed because of global warming, in that scenario, they say there would have been 13. Now, on average, 26 a year.
Good job. Thanks so much. Much appreciated. On that note, let's have a look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week looks warm and settled, with the shower risk reducing, but eastern coasts will be cooler. It's mostly fine out there now, if a little chilly for some, but parts of northeast Britain are grey. That cloud will move across northeast England this morning, but elsewhere it'll be mostly sunny. It'll be largely dry, but a few showers will break out across the south of Ireland and southwest England, and it'll turn out warm, although eastern coasts will be cooler, especially in the brisk wind down the North Sea. The afternoon looks mainly fine, but showers in the southwest will be turning heavier, with hail and thunder possible in southwest Ireland. They'll fade this evening to leave a mostly dry and clear night, but low cloud will extend across central and eastern England later. It'll be a little chilly. Tomorrow looks largely dry and sunny once early cloud lifts. It'll be warmest in the west, coolest in the east, especially for North Sea coastal areas that remain cloudy and breezy. Friday will be similar.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
A little bit of football chat to end.
Oh, why not?
Goodison Park, as people will know, is about to end being Everton's home football stadium at the end of the season. One game left there. They moved to a new stadium, and it was going to be destroyed or it was going to be built over. That's changing now.
Yeah, because they're keeping it for the women's team, which I think is really important. You know, we're looking at this aerial shot of Goodison Park, and it's all the houses that are surrounded there, the history that will be linked to all of these clubs. It was the same when I lived in Manchester. You would see around Old Trafford, you know, the stalls that people are selling scarves and memorabilia. So, yes, it's brilliant for the women's game. It raises the profile, but it's also at the heart of communities. Football always has been about that, so I think that's brilliant.
I have to say, I for one am not sad that Goodison Park is shuttering. I feel like Arsenal always drop points there.
Yes, and can I make this point also? I agree. But I really miss Highbury.
Yeah, well, Highbury was wonderful. People used to call Highbury the Highbury Library.
How rude.
Well, no, it was kind of fair to some extent, but it was different because you were so close to the pitch, and there was a different type of atmosphere. I mean, the Emirates now is a fantastic stadium.
I haven't been yet.
Haven't you?
That's a hint.
There we go. Well, OK, I'll have to pick up some more tickets. No, I mean, Highbury was just glorious, and we were good back then. That's probably why I have such good memories of it. The Emirates is a great modern stadium, but I actually think what they did with Highbury after was quite tasteful.
Yeah.
You know, it's now homes, flats, but with a central garden, so it's sort of kept sort of, not as a football pitch, of course. We've got some other pictures of, I think we've got White Hart Lane, which I don't particularly want to dwell on.
Yeah.
Apparently, by the way, their new stadium is fantastic.
Yeah, again, family went there at the weekend. Federico, who's just 8 years old, I've married into a Spurs family, unfortunately.
Then we definitely need to get you some tickets to the Emirates. Pull you back to where
just the feedback from that, it is a wonderful stadium.
Yeah. So what is happening to White Hart Lane? I don't know. It looks like something by these pictures. And then Upton Park we've also got, which is, I guess, one... I bet if we ask West Ham fans, they're really gutted they had to leave.
Yeah, completely, because they've been moved to the Olympic Stadium, which, again, my point is this, that the Olympic Stadium, sure, great, but it's not where the people remember it. It's not got that history. And I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? A connection to a club, a love of the club and a ground.
It is. But you can understand what happened. Otherwise, it'd be an empty stadium with whatever 80,000 seaters. Someone's going to use it, and so I get it. It's when Arsenal moved, it was just across the way, so it wasn't as controversial. But anyway, fantastic. The Goodison Park will still be used by the Everton women's team, and we look forward to seeing how they do there next season. I guess that their last game is this weekend, or maybe it's even midweek, but it'll be historic. Everyone, by the way, has been quoting about what an atmosphere there was there. I saw Alex Ferguson quoted, Paul Scholes, Jose Mourinho saying that, it was a really tough place to play, Goodison Park. Right, we'll take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, why the United Nations top humanitarian officials have condemned Israel.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word from Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, we'll look at what Israel's block on aid entering Gaza means for the millions of Palestinians already suffering on the Strip. But first, all the top stories.
Thanks, Wilfred. In his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney has told Sky News that Canadians weren't impressed by Keir Starmer's decision to invite Donald Trump on a second state visit to the UK.
It was at a time when we were being quite clear, some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
According to hospital officials, at least 48 people have been killed, including 22 children, in Israeli strikes on 2 hospitals in Gaza. The Israeli military has also issued evacuation orders for 3 ports in Yemen. It claims the ports are being used by the Iran-aligned Houthi group. And the judge in California has reduced the Menendez brothers' murder sentences, meaning they could be eligible for parole. Eric and Lyle Menendez received life sentences after being convicted of murdering their parents, Jose and Kitty. This was in 1989. The brothers maintain that they acted out self-defense after years of sexual abuse. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has pulled its support for assisted dying. The bill, MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. It comes after plans to legalise assisted dying in Scotland passed the first stage at Holyrood.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Now, returning to our top story, and Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has sat down with Sky News for his first major interview since the election. He's told Sam Washington that Canadians are not impressed with the UK's welcoming approach to Donald Trump, and also appealed to the King for help.
Knowing that the President has a desire for Canada,
yes.
Part of what you're doing is symbolic, isn't it? You're inviting King Charles to come here to this building,
yes,
to open Parliament. Are you trying to send a message to the US President?
Well, I think His Majesty coming sends a message first and foremost to Canadians. It is a message of sovereignty, and I think one of the points I've made from the start of when I first became Prime Minister is to emphasize that Canada, it's an amazing country, the best country in the world, I'll add for your viewers.
I'd be surprised if you didn't say that.
Yeah, exactly. But it is founded on Indigenous peoples, the English and the French. 3 peoples founded this country, in effect. We've come a long way in reconciliation with the Indigenous people. Now we are one of the most diverse societies. And so the point to be made from the history, the lineage, go back to our head of state, but also a reminder of the nature of what Canada is and has become, is a very powerful message, first and foremost.
The King, your head of state, of course, has also invited Donald Trump on an unprecedented second state visit. Keir Starmer personally handed him the invitation in the Oval Office. All the while, he was threatening Canada's existence. What did Canadians make of that?
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear. Some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
Well, Sam sent us this update from Ottawa.
Today in Ottawa was all about domestic politics, Wilf. I'm standing here outside the Senate building, but all the government buildings are really close by. He was swearing in his new cabinet today, and after that he gave a press conference. And I noticed, attending that press conference, that the subject of Trump just didn't feature didn't loom very large in what he had to say to the assembled journalists. So it already started playing on my mind. I wasn't sure whether it was because today was about domestic politics. But as you saw in that report there, I did ask him why he went to go and meet Donald Trump, given that the president was still threatening his sovereignty, even in the Oval Office when he was sitting there, and did that show weakness on his part? And then he gave the answer that you saw in that report, which was that actually I think the president wants to have a closer relationship with Canada. That's not the same as saying that he is going to demand it or take it by force. I then asked him that very question. I said, so did you use that to your political advantage? Were you essentially frightening Canadians into thinking that Trump's rhetoric was in fact representing intent? Well, he resiled from that, and what he reminded me was that when he took over the Prime Minister role, because he'd become leader of the Liberal Party after Trudeau's resignation, he only had one short perfunctory telephone call with Donald Trump at the height of all of those unveiled threats to Canada's sovereignty, in which they just agreed to speak again after the election. After the election, I think it was the first phone call that he made. They had a far more constructive conversation, I think, that actually took them some way forward. So I think already the path was being paved before his visit to the Oval Office, where I think already tensions were starting to simmer down. So I get the impression that Prime Minister Carney now thinks that he has a path forward to work with Donald Trump. But as you know, and as he said, the ways he works in are unpredictable. So he's preparing for any potential outcome.
Sam Washington there for us in Ottawa, and her full interview, it's 24 minutes. It's really well worth watching. If you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you'll be able to watch that full interview, exclusive interview with Mark Carney. Well, let's get more now on one of the other top stories of the day. According to hospital officials, at least 48 people have been killed, including 22 children, in Israeli strikes on 2 hospitals in Gaza. The United Nations top humanitarian official has also condemned Israel for, in his words, deliberately and unashamedly blocking aid to Gaza. Joining us now, Clemence Lagouardat, who is Oxfam's humanitarian response lead for Gaza, and joins us now. Clemence, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can we get your reaction, first of all, to this news of the day? Are these hospitals you're well aware of? Have you even visited them yourself?
So I haven't visited them myself, but I know where they are. I know that they are key in providing support to the population in Gaza, especially now with the resumption of the hostilities and an increase in terms of incident of mass casualty.
And what's your reaction to the news?
I mean, as I'm hearing every time on an attack on healthcare and health facility, it's heartbreaking. The system is put to its knee, and soon it will not be able to support the people in Gaza.
How bad, more broadly, is the humanitarian situation there at the moment?
I mean, I think it reached an all-time low since the beginning of the war. It's been now more than 70 days that nothing has entered the Gaza Strip, not a drop of fuel, of food, no medicine, like really nothing. It's the longest blockade that the Gaza Strip has suffered since 2023. And I mean, we have 2.2 million people that are exclusively depending on this aid entering.
And you at Oxfam have people there on the ground telling you this at the moment? You were there yourself quite recently?
So yeah, I was in Gaza from November to end of April. I left, but we do have a national team that is there and that is continuing working every day, and a couple of international staff.
When you kind of see that position, do you wish the international community was doing more forcefully, or do you think that there's not so much more that could be done?
I think the international community needs to speak louder, need to apply pressure. As humanitarian worker, we cannot solve the situation if there is not a political push for a permanent ceasefire and for the border to open. We are working with Band-Aid, we are working with scraps, and if the situation doesn't change, there is not much more that we will be able to do.
And there's a court case going through the High Court here, and Oxfam is is involved in what way? You're giving some evidence. Tell us about that case and how significant it is.
Yeah, so Oxfam is providing evidence on the humanitarian impact of the sale of arms, and especially spare part of the F-35, which is a jet, by the UK government to the government of Israel. So we are hoping that there is going to be a decision that will bring the UK government to stop completely selling arms to Israel.
Of course, the real country that makes a difference here on pretty much every topic, but particularly arms, is the United States. What do you make of the relationship as it stands between Netanyahu and Trump? Is it significant that he's not visiting Israel on his current trip to the Middle East, or not?
I think, yeah, I think it is significant, but I think the Western other countries should also voice the concern. At this point, we all need to be on the right side of history, and we should not be bystanders. So the European Union has also a responsibility. The UK government has also a responsibility in voicing out the concern and pushing for a political solution.
I just wanted to bring it back finally on the situation this morning that we were talking about at the start of the interview. When you do see stories like that, do you fear for your staff in Gaza?
Yeah, of course. I think I've been working in a lot of emergency contexts. The context in Gaza is one of the one where I'm not sure I will be able to see my colleagues anymore, not because it's impossible for them to leave, which is the case, but also because I'm not sure they're going to be alive. I mean, there is nowhere safe in Gaza right now. There is a risk of being a collateral damage, and it is incredibly worrying.
Clemence, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Clemence Lagouardat from Oxfam. Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we will be talking about tech companies under fire for failing to protect young girls from online predators. We'll be right back.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West. The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Premier League running is live on USA and streaming on Peacock. Only 2 matches remain.
The climax of the Premier League season.
Friday, exclusively on Peacock. Top 5 hopeful Chelsea host Man United. Sunday on USA. Newcastle continue to fight for Champions League qualification when they visit Arsenal. This is the Premier League run-in. Live on USA and Peacock.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back. Well, an investigation by the NSPCC has revealed how easy it is for predators to target young girls online.
Well, the children's charity says tech companies are failing to protect girls from abuse and that parents are right to be concerned about the risks their daughters are being exposed to on social media.
Let's bring in now Matthew Sooromimo, who's the charity's head of child safety online and has been carrying out this research and various other investigations. What does the new research tell us, Matthew?
Good morning. Well, today the NSPCC's report identifies that there are safety risks on 10 social media platforms that make girls vulnerable to abuse, harassment and grooming. For example, our researchers identified that it's too easy to use search functions to pick out girls. It's also possible for adult strangers to directly message girls. And not all of the risks that our researchers have identified are covered by Ofcom in their illegal harms code. And Ofcom polices how technology companies abide by child safety laws. All of those risks need to be covered by Ofcom's illegal harms code to protect girls.
And Matthew, just broadly speaking, if the UK weakens any online safety laws because of, say, trade tariffs, how concerned would you be?
Well, fundamentally, the Online Safety Act has been passed by Parliament, and the government has been clear that the Online Safety Act needs to be implemented in order to protect our children. And the NSPCC today in our report has set out 27 steps that the technology companies could take to make girls safer online.
Is though the kind of main point you're making that Ofcom has been too weak in its interpretation of that law, or do you actually want to see the law go further such that Ofcom can then take their interpretation a bit further?
One of the things is that the government needs to actually strengthen the law. The government needs to ensure that when tech companies have age limits on their platforms, that those age limits are actually enforced properly. That will require a change in the law, that will require ministerial action.
Which of the platforms, if there is a difference between them, which of the platforms are the worst perpetrators?
Right, so the NSPCC, we're not in the business of naming and shaming platforms. What we are doing is highlighting the responsibility of all of the technology companies to abide by the Online Safety Act, to take the very practical steps required by Ofcom, and also to take the 27 actions that we've laid out in our report, which will make girls safer, which will ensure that girls are not subject to grooming, harassment, abuse on social media platforms.
But you're the voice for parents, essentially. And if you were able to say, look, X, Y and Z platform should be doing more and isn't, wouldn't that be this be the perfect opportunity to do that, I suppose?
Important thing is, rather than putting the emphasis on one company or another, is to stress all companies, individual and collective responsibility for abiding by child safety laws. All of the companies are required to do risk assessments, identifying where girls and children generally could be more vulnerable. Those companies will be publishing their risk assessments, and that's something that will be available to all parents as well as the wider public to ensure that the companies are held to account.
Should social media just be banned for under 16s?
The NSPCC doesn't believe there should be an outright social media ban. One of the risks of doing that is that children are actually driven to even less regulated spaces where they become even more at risk. The wider internet world is important for children's development, their connections and their learning. What we need to do is ensure that the companies implement their child safety responsibilities to ensure that social media platforms are safe by design.
That's really interesting to hear you guys say that. Obviously, that debate rears its head a number of times. Just broaden it out for us, step away from today's research. What about kids' addictiveness to screen time and smartphones as and when they get them in general? What level of investigation and research do you have on that, and any advice for parents?
The advice we've got from parents is on our online safety hub. We set out suggestions for how parents can have sensitive and measured conversations with their children about their social media use, and also identify whether their children are facing specific safety risks. For example, have their children accepted connection requests from adult strangers, people they've never met.
Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Mari's with Leah and I now, and let's just remind us where we are on this. So the Ofcom have now announced their interpretation of the law. Is that now done and dusted, both on the Ofcom side and the government side?
Well, the government is always keeping things under review. We know that Peter Carl, the Science and Tech Secretary, has said that he's frustrated with certain elements of the Online Safety Act, for example, that perhaps need tweaking or going further. And so the government are saying they're always looking at ways to keep children safe. The difficulty is it's a bit of a wild west out there, and governments are normally always behind the trends online. If you look at the Online Safety Act, for example, there was a huge argument for years, really, under the Conservative government about legal but harmful, if you remember that. And they ended up scrapping the section on legal but harmful because they felt it was too wishy-washy, hard to enforce. Kimberly Badenoch said they didn't want to legislate for hurt feelings, and so they never bothered with that. And some people said that that was a bit of a cop-out and they should have gone further. We now have the discussion around the digital services tax and whether that might be a part of a deal, a trade deal with the US. But if you look at the briefings that have been coming out of some of the government sources in the papers over the past few weeks, some are trying to argue that that might be pandering to US tech giants whilst compromising safety for children. So it's a really difficult balance for the government at the moment.
It's a really difficult balance. On the US side of things, though, you'd have to say, for the deal that's been reached so far, you know, first step might have been the digital sales tax. The next step might have been relaxing the online safety bill. And the fact that the first step wasn't even taken, I think, is relatively significant. It does suggest the online safety bill itself is pretty well protected.
Yeah, and I think also the government is really, really keen not to feed any whiff of a perception that they might be compromising safety for economic benefit. If you look, interestingly, at the campaign from the Conservatives around banning smartphones in schools, they were talking about that a lot with Laura Trott, the Shadow Education Secretary. And the government and the Prime Minister said, we don't need to ban smartphones in schools. They're already banned in most schools anyway, so we don't need the help with it. And a lot of education figures came out and said that that wasn't the case, that school leaders were being pressured by certain groups of parents for their kids to have smartphones, but they didn't want to follow the Australian model. And so you have a situation where Labour is trying to make sure that their aims and all of their policies are there to protect. But the difficulty, and you pointed on this with that interview, Wilf, is that the addictiveness of some of this online content is part of a concern. However, there isn't really any regulation around how addictive some of this content might be.
Mari, great stuff as always. Mari's can stick around. I think we've got some live pictures coming in. Have we got live pictures from Saudi Arabia, where, of course, President Trump is on his three-stop tour to the Middle East. Maybe it'll end up being more. He's due to depart Saudi Arabia for Qatar in the next hour or so. So I guess these are pictures. We might see his sort of official goodbye there in Riyadh in some kind of a government or palace building that must be. We'll come back to that live when we see President Trump leaving for Qatar. Now, Kim Kardashian has told a court in France that she thought she was going to be raped and killed during a robbery at the Paris hotel she was staying at. She was giving evidence at the trial of 10 defendants accused of robbing her at gunpoint in October of 2016. Katie Spencer has this report for us from Paris.
She might have seemed poised arriving at the Palais de Justice, but inside for Kim Kardashian, the reality of reliving what was a terrifying ordeal would prove emotional. Coming face to face with the accused almost 9 years after she was robbed at gunpoint. Her lawyer afterwards saying while she forgives, the trauma has stayed with her.
You try to have, generosity in your heart, and someone asks you point blank, please forgive me for what I did to you, and she did. But deep inside, she's still their victim.
Far from being an elite gang of thieves, these are some of the defendants, 2 admitting playing a role, 8 denying they did. Most pensioners and dubbed the grandpa robbers, but their ages no deflection from the terror the star felt as she was dragged around her hotel room. He had a gun up to me. I absolutely did think I was going to die, she told the court, saying he'd pulled me towards him. I'm naked. The robe had opened up. I was certain that was the moment he was going to rape me. She'd been in town for Paris Fashion Week, staying at this luxury penthouse when at 3 a.m. 2 men dressed in police uniforms burst through her door, forcing this man, the concierge, to translate. She said she begged him, "What's going to happen to us? Please translate to them. I have babies. I have babies." He said, "I don't know if we're going to die."
It was like hysterics. She was terrified. She was terrorized. Yeah. It was a hard time for her also.
Hours before, reporters from around the world had queued to get inside. 490 accredited journalists fighting it out for 30 seats. Behind the media frenzy, here for one of the most recognisable faces in the world, in court, this was less the picture-perfect, composed Kim Kardashian the world is so used to seeing. The filter gone, at times she struggled to get her words out, reliving how afraid she'd felt. Millions of pounds worth of her jewellery has never been returned. But in court, she did receive several defendant apologies, including one from Yunus Abbas, who's since written a book about how he'd acted as a lookout.
He's been waiting for this moment, a very important moment for him. Yes, to be able just to say I'm sorry, just to say I'm human, I'm sorry.
Whilst the reality star spoke of having empathy, she said she can't change the trauma she still feels. But walking away, she said she hoped this moment will finally bring some closure. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Paris.
Well, let's have a quick look at the weather before we leave you.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week looks warm and settled with the shower risk reducing, but eastern coasts will be cooler. It's mostly fine out there now, if a little chilly for some, but parts of northeast Britain are grey. That cloud will move across northeast England this morning, but elsewhere it'll be mostly sunny. It'll be largely dry, but a few showers will break out across the south of Ireland and southwest England, and it'll turn out warm, although eastern coasts will be cooler, especially in the brisk wind down on the North Sea. The afternoon looks mainly fine, but showers in the southwest will turn heavier with hail and thunder possible in southwest Ireland, and they'll fade this evening to leave a mostly dry and clear night. That's your weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Our top story, more than 50 dead in Israeli strikes on Gaza. We'll have the latest.
Also ahead, in his first major interview since his election as Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney tells Sky News Canadians were not impressed by the UK's decision to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump.
Plus, we'll speak to the directors of Sky documentary series about legendary TV interview and broadcaster David Frost.
Looking forward to that at past, with a number of clips for you as well. It's Wednesday, the 14th of May. Your headlines. Breaking
news this morning. Hospital sources in Gaza have told us that 53 people have been killed, including 22 children, in Israeli strikes on homes in northern Gaza.
In separate incidents, Israel also targeted 2 hospitals in Gaza in the last 24 hours. Canada's new Prime Minister says the UK's offer of a second state visit to Donald Trump cuts across Ottawa's efforts to defend their sovereignty.
To be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance.
We're going to get to all of those stories and much more in just a moment, but we can actually take you live now to King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh. Donald Trump due to depart Riyadh any moment now. Well, there he is, as you can see, and we are seeing him, of course, following what's been about a day or two there, and he's off to Qatar next and then on to the UAE. We just caught the back end there of, I guess, what was the sort of official departure ceremony. We're going to get those pictures back up for you that were taken just moments ago. And, of course, guys, this trip has been hugely trumpeted. Here are the live pictures of him departing just moments ago. And it's been a very warm welcome, Mari, throughout the last 24 hours, as we'd expected, with a sort of triumphant speech yesterday where he was talking about the scale of investment that he was expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really interesting from a UK perspective is Donald Trump isn't actually massively popular as a politician, and that's what Keir Starmer's been negotiating as the UK Prime Minister. And what's really interesting is the rhetoric coming out of the White House and Donald Trump when it comes to his relationship with some of these Gulf states, much more positive and kind of complimentary than perhaps has been the case with some of the other nations, including to an extent us. And I think what's really interesting is after we had that trade announcement last week with the US and the UK that they said was, a massive triumph, although not a full-blown trade deal, you can see that Donald Trump is on the offensive to get as many deals as possible, signing a historic arms deal yesterday with Saudi Arabia, really wanting to do a bit of a trade blitz, as it were, across the world.
Able to bring in Ali Bunkle now live in Jerusalem, here to talk about a different story, which we'll get to in a moment. But Ali, just give us the regional perspective on how the first day and a half or so of this trip from the President of the United States to the region has gone down.
Yeah, I think it's gone on pretty well so far. Hugely anticipated trip on so many levels, particularly economic levels. And as Mari was talking about, some huge deals signed yesterday. And I think we should expect more of the same as he now moves on to Qatar and then the UAE. But also a lot riding on it for sort of wider geopolitical terms as well. I mean, the lifting of sanctions, US sanctions on Syria announced by Donald Trump yesterday, hugely significant and could be massively consequential for the future of Syria. And then as he goes to Doha today, it's only an hour and a half flight, very short hop really from Riyadh, the potential for some pretty serious talks on Gaza. You'll have all the key players really in the same city. Hamas leadership many of them are based in Doha. Of course, you've got the Qataris there, and they've been one of the major mediators. The Israelis have sent a small delegation last night, so they are in town as well. and then President Trump and his team. So if President Trump decides to do so and tries to push on substantive Gaza talks, then there could be some progress on that front. So, you know, there are a lot more to come, but already it has been a pretty significant visit on many levels, and it has gone down pretty well in parts of the Middle East. Of course, in Israel, it is being watched with some trepidation because of the deals that he might be doing with other parts of the region, and of course, you know, the fact that he's not coming here.
Well, I mean, on that note, Ali, bring us up to speed with what has come out this morning in Gaza. I guess it underlines once again the need for progress in ceasefire talks, if that is indeed what's going to take place in Qatar.
Yeah, it really does. You have a very sort of stark, almost sort of split screen moment with the sort of the glitz and the sort of the pomp of Trump's visits in the Gulf area and him meeting leaders there and the sort of the vast wealth on display, and then what is happening in Gaza. In the last 24 hours, I think close to 100 people have been killed in multiple strikes. Overnight and into this morning, 53 were told by sources in the health ministry have confirmed to us, killed in strikes in Jabalia, which is in northern Gaza. Now, that's happened because reasonably late last night, Islamic Jihad, the group in the smaller militant group in Gaza, fired 3 missiles into Israel. 2 of them were intercepted, 1 landed in open areas. And the IDF issued evacuation orders for the Jabalia area and then struck it. But 53 people, including 22 children, we are told, killed in those attacks. So a really bloody 24 hours. That's after this incident as well on the European hospital, when the IDF say that they were targeting Mohammed Sinwar, who they believed was in a bunker underneath the hospital complex. No confirmation on whether or not no confirmation on whether he was actually there or whether they established that one way or the other. But, you know, if Donald Trump needed any kind of reminder about what is going on the other side of the Middle East region to where he currently is, then the last 24 hours will have given him that. And we'll see whether or not he is encouraged by the success they had in getting the American-Israeli Eden Alexander released by Hamas earlier this week. We'll see whether Donald Trump is encouraged by that in order to try and push for more, both on the humanitarian aid front, but also potentially for a ceasefire in Gaza.
It is an extraordinary contrast, isn't it, Ali? The sort of ongoing, perhaps even worsening, dreadful situation in Gaza and the opulence, the celebration that has been taking place in Riyadh and no doubt will continue to take place in the days ahead for President Trump's trip. We'll see what level of focus, as you said, there'll be on ceasefire talks between Israel and Gaza when they touch down in Qatar. Just let's pivot back, Ali, to the president's trip in the region ahead of his departure to stop number 2 in Qatar, and obviously then he goes on to UAE. To what extent, you said it's viewed with trepidation by Israel, some of these trips. How high on the agenda do you think for the US and other countries are some kind of re-engagement with the Abraham Accords, and whether that is actually a potential great positive for Israel, depending exactly on what does emerge in the coming days or months of this US president's term?
Well, just to remind people, the Abraham Accords were signed towards the end of Donald Trump's first presidency, and they were a genuine piece of history and foreign policy win for him. So it saw Israel normalize relations on a diplomatic and financial footing with a number of countries in the region, particularly the UAE, Bahrain, but also others like Morocco, for example. And, you know, it really was very, very significant. And it's Donald Trump's ambition to broaden that and to bring other Arab countries sort of into that grouping, if you like. And Saudi Arabia really is the sort of, you know, the crown jewel of all of that. And Benjamin Netanyahu I remember interviewing Netanyahu 2 years ago, and he made no secret of it, that he thought a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia would be game-changing for the Middle East. And the deals that we've seen Trump do over the last 24 hours in Saudi Arabia, some of those were supposed to involve a normalization deal with Israel, but it looks like he might have moved on from that.
Let's listen in to the president. He's now addressing this final gathering in Saudi Arabia.
Tonight, the Gulf nations are at the forefront of creating a stable, peaceful, and prosperous Middle East. And I have to say that I've seen such progress. It's really incredible. I've also seen great unity and friendships. I've spent a little time with you just before this, and I've seen tremendous unity, tremendous friendship, and the whole world is watching the Middle East, and many are watching with envy. You have something very special going on. Incredible opportunities are within reach for this region. If we can simply stop the aggression from a small group of pretty bad actors. The Biden administration created havoc and bedlam by basically being incompetent, but by empowering Iran and its proxies, sending them billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars, senselessly. I couldn't believe it to watch. One of the reasons I said, let's do this again. But what they did was so bad, while turning his back on the Gulf allies. Those days are over. Everybody at this table knows where my loyalties lie, always have. They'll never waver, never. And we'll stand with our friends and partners, and we'll confront the aggression that threatens us all. I want to make a deal with Iran. I want to do something if it's possible. But for that to happen, it must stop sponsoring terror, halt its bloody proxy wars, and permanently and verifiably cease its pursuit of nuclear weapons. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. I don't imagine there's anybody at this table or anybody in this room that would say they can. I'm strongly urging all nations to join us in fully and totally enforcing the sanctions that I just placed on Iran, and we also placed secondary sanctions, which are in certain ways even more devastating. Iran, as you know, had no money when I left office. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. There was no attack. There was no thought of attack. There would have been no attack if I were president. But bad things happened in that election. And I said, let's do it again. And by doing it again, it became much more historic. It's a much more historic election, much more powerful election. And we have a mandate. We won every swing state. We won by millions of votes. We won 2,750 districts. We call them districts. Out of a total, if you look at the number, it was 2,750 to 505. The whole map was red, red meaning Republican. So I will say recently we launched strikes on more than 1,100 Houthi targets in Yemen, as you know. And last week they agreed to stop. They don't want to be targeting our commercial ships anymore. And they said, that's enough, that's enough. We did about 52 days, 52 nights. It didn't end. We just put in a budget of $1 trillion. It's our biggest budget, military budget we have ever put in. And the United States is very, very strong right now. It's amazing. In a short period of time, we've been there 100 days. And in a short period of time, we've done what a lot of people don't do in 4 years. We're a hot country, just like you're a hot area. And we're going to keep it that way. In Gaza, my administration shares the hope of so many in this region for future of safety and dignity of the Palestinian people. But that cannot happen as long as Gaza's leaders take delight in raping, torturing, and murdering innocent people. Can't have it. I greatly appreciate the constructive role that the leaders in this room have played in trying to bring the terrible conflict to an end, including by helping secure the release of American hostage Edan Alexander. It was a big day yesterday, a very important day. I was told just before I left that they were going to be releasing Edan. We thought Edan was dead 3 weeks ago. They said Edan was no longer living. and it was a very, very good thing. Ultimately, all hostages of all nationalities must be released as a stepping stone to peace, and I think it's going to be happening. A lot of things are happening. A lot of very positive things are happening on every front. With the support of leaders in this room, and they're great leaders, you are, we are currently exploring normalizing relations with Syria's new government, as you know, beginning with my meeting with President Ahmed al-Shara and Secretary Rubio's meeting with the Syrian foreign minister in Turkey after discussing the situation with Crown Prince Mohammed and President Erdogan of Turkey. I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start. It gives them a chance for greatness. The sanctions were really crippling, very powerful. And I spoke to Mohammed, and I spoke to our friend from Turkey, who we just spoke to also by phone now, but felt very strongly that this would give them a chance. It's not going to be easy anyway, so it gives them a good, strong chance. And it was my honor to do so. So we will be dropping all of the sanctions on Syria, which I think really is going to be a good thing. And we made a speech last night, and that was the thing that got the biggest applause from the room. We had a very crowded room with thousands of people, and the statement that got the biggest applause was dropping the sanctions on Syria. Likewise, in Lebanon, there's a new chance for a future free from the grip of Hezbollah terrorists if the new president and prime minister can rebuild an effective Lebanese state. We just appointed a very good ambassador, a friend of mine who's Lebanese, and I didn't even know that. And I said, why do you want to be the ambassador to Lebanon? That could be dangerous. He said, I don't care. I grew up there. I love the country, and I don't care if it's dangerous or not dangerous. I want to do that. And he's a very capable man, very successful man from the United States, and he's going to be your ambassador. He's going to do a great job. But this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to forge a Lebanon that is prosperous and at peace with its neighbors. And I think things can really happen there. They've had a tough go of it for a long time. At the end of my first term, all of the momentum in this region was toward peace. I especially want to thank and congratulate the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain for their vision and courage in signing the historic Abraham Accords. It was something that's a very big thing. I believe we would have had it filled out had the election been called fairly, which it wasn't. It was a rigged election. I hope that in the near future we can continue that progress. We have a mandate from the American people, the likes of which people haven't seen for 129 years. They say it was the most consequential election in America in 129 years. So that sounds like a long time, so we'll take that. But in the future, we'll continue that progress by adding more countries to the Abraham Accords. We have 4, and I think they're going to be filling up very rapidly. Biden didn't do anything because he never did anything about anything. He had no capability, he had no ability, and it was a shame what he's done to so many countries, including our own. We had an interesting fact. About a year ago, there was a story that we're having a hard time getting enlistments into the military, and it was at the lowest level almost ever. People didn't want to go into our military. And it just came out last week, you probably saw that we have now the strongest enlistment in the history of our country. They say 38 years. One said 37, one said 32, and one said ever. So we just had the strongest enlistment in the history of the United States of America. So think of it. In 1 year, we went from they can't get people to enlist to we have the strongest enlistment. And that includes the police departments, too. We're having a hard time getting people to be police, the great law enforcement arm that we're known for, and now we're setting records. It's hard to get a job. I mean, frankly, the lines of people wanting to be police officers and go into the military, and it's a matter of spirit. We have great spirit in the country right now. We've done a lot in 100 days, I'll tell you that. It's all started on November 5th with the election. But a stable and peaceful Middle East will be a successful and prosperous Middle East, and that's what you've done, and that's what you're doing. And, you know, it's amazing because when I was here last, it was fine, it was doing good. And then I see the things that you're doing here and in your countries. It's just an incredible what you're doing. Is the whole world is talking about it. The whole world is watching us. Look at all the news over there, the fake news. Look at them. The whole world is talking about what you're doing, and you're the envy of the world. Together, we're in this room, and we're going to forge a Middle East that will be a thriving commercial, diplomatic, and cultural crossroads at the geographic center of the world. That's what it is. It's the center of the world. I look forward to working with you, and I want to thank Mohammed. I want to thank you, Crown Prince. We have a special relationship. We have long had a special relationship, but it was an honor to spend a couple of days with you, and I'll see you again soon, and I'll see you a lot. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
President Trump just wrapping up his comments there at the Gulf US summit in Riyadh, the last sort of big agenda item for his Saudi Arabia portion of his trip. Ali's been listening in for us in Jerusalem. Ali, there was a lot there. I don't know if there was any single headline that jumps out more than the others, but clearly the confirmation, explicit verbal confirmation from the president in the region, both that sanctions on Syria are going and a deal with Iran is high on his agenda.
Yeah, it's extraordinary listening to the language used by Donald Trump addressing Middle East leaders when you compare and contrast it to the sort of language he has been using recently for the EU and for China, Canada and others. I mean, it's sort of quite mind-boggling in a way. But, you know, as it does with Donald Trump, often it comes down to money, and the Middle East and the Gulf states have some money to spend and to do deals and contracts with America, and that speaks to what Donald Trump wants. You know, in terms of the bigger geopolitical stuff, yeah, Iran is something that they are pursuing very conservatively. It's also really interesting to see how Saudi Arabia has changed in the years on that. When President Obama negotiated the Iranian nuclear deal, what was it, a decade ago, the Saudis didn't like it. They said it was weak. They thought it sort of destabilized the region. But things have changed in a big way, in so many ways. And the Saudi Arabia of today has sort of softened its relations with Iran. Actually, Mohammed bin Salman sent his cousin Prince Khalid to Tehran recently, and he was sort of welcomed there with open arms. I mean, they're not, you know, close allies, but they are not the two sort of big regional powers and enemies that they once were. And Saudi Arabia, you know, has a very different outlook on life right now. It's looking to diversify its economy away from reliance on fossil fuels into sort of areas like tourism, for example. And I think they probably see that, you know, a deal with Iran is better than conflict with Iran, even if they're not directly involved in the conflict. You know, the proximity of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states to Iran, which is just the other side of the Gulf, really not very far whatsoever, would probably drag a lot of the region into it. And, you know, that is not what Saudi Arabia wants its future to look like. And so, you know, I think they even, a couple of months ago, offered to potentially even mediate talks between the two sides. And so you really do have a very different Middle East to the last time that Donald Trump was in power and was in the region. He's always had an affection and a soft spot for the region. It is, as I said, with the Abraham Accords, a region where he's had success in the past, and he hopes to expand those Abraham Accords. But, you know, it relies on what's happening in Gaza. And we spoke about the sort of the split screen moment that's happening right now between the war in Gaza and the glitz of what's happening in these vast halls on the other side of the Middle East. But, you know, Trump won't be deaf to it. The likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE, you know, will be in his ear, urging him to do something to alleviate the suffering there. And, you know, I'm sure that is what he will be partly getting around to more of when he goes to Qatar, and that is also when I said it concerns, and the Israelis are looking at this with some trepidation. They will know that they're not part of this conversation in any meaningful way over the next few days, and it's Donald Trump being wined and dined and being flattered and being attracted by big economic deals and the like, and Israel is not in the room, and that will be of some concern to Benjamin Netanyahu.
I mean, Mari, of course, notably also not in the room are any European leaders. Maybe that's to be expected. It's a US Gulf set of meetings and trips over the next couple of days. But again, we kind of reflect on this in light of Sam Washington's interview with Mark Carney as well. But there's, as Ali reflects on, very different rhetoric for Middle Eastern leaders from Trump compared to European and neighbouring countries, but also a sense of really only the Trump voice matters to some of these countries out of the Western regions that used to be much more kind of collectively together on these sorts of discussions.
Yeah, it's really interesting if you look at the language he was using for Canada, the UK, the EU, how aggressive he's been about the EU, for instance. Never mind, of course, Ukraine. And all important, let's not forget that there's possible talks between Russia and Ukraine on Thursday. We don't expect Donald Trump to be attending that on Thursday because he's expected still to be busy in the Middle East, but nonetheless, it almost feels that some of those connections with European and Western allies are very much on the back burner, whereas relations like this, for instance, are put front and centre with a much more contrasting rhetoric. And I think it indicates, as you say, Trump's voice is almighty, as it were, at the moment when it comes to the US administration. And often it's about cash.
Mari, great stuff. As always, Ali, thank you also for reflecting on that. We're going to take a quick break here on Sky News Breakfast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Just want to remind you of those latest pictures just coming out of the Middle East. Of course, the Gulf-US summit hosted in Saudi Arabia by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President Trump was just addressing that gathering just before we took a break. And of course, in the hours ahead, President Trump's going to depart Saudi Arabia for the rest of his three-stop tour in the Middle East. Perhaps it could be a fourth stop, as we've been discussing over the last couple of days. But off to Qatar next, then the UAE. And he was effusive with his warmth towards pretty much all areas of the Middle East and the leaders around the table, but also some of the countries that weren't there, saying he was going to relax sanctions on Syria and also saying, I want to make a deal with Iran. We'll continue to keep you updated on Trump's trip in the Middle East throughout the day here on Sky News. Nyalda and Mark, Ali, all there in the region for us. Now, tonight at 9 p.m, Sky Documentaries will air the latest episode of David Frost Versus, which explores some of the extraordinary interviews done by the legendary broadcast journalist, a.k.a. Dad. Here's a preview.
I want to involve both world leaders and world entertainers.
David Frost, he was the king of interviewers.
Clinically, I should be dead. Emotionally, I was.
He got people to talk because he inspired trust.
He's just charm personified, but underneath is there's steel.
Do you feel now optimistic?
I'm always optimistic.
You have to talk to both sides.
You're making the situation worse, not better.
The single best interview Dad ever did.
They were looking for a confession.
Why did you approve a plan that was clearly illegal?
Well, I really am unbelievably delighted to welcome two of the directors of the series, which I had a role in producing as well. Marion Milne, who directed the Middle East episode, and Liz Merman, who directed the Richard Nixon episode. Guys, welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Great to see you, Will.
What I have to say is fascinating is the story we were just covering before coming to discuss this series, because in the process of all of us making this series, we tried to pick out things that were relevant. And Liz, just watching Trump in the Middle East, it does have echoes of Richard Nixon episode, Middle East episode.
Yes, I mean, you know, Nixon used to be the most notorious American president until recent times. And so, you know, creating a portrait of explaining to people what Nixon was like and just how loathed he was a big challenge in the show.
In terms of making the programme, Marion, I mean, you're an experienced archival-based documentary maker. Have you ever tackled a sort of base of archive where you had quite so much to pick from?
I don't think so, Wilf. And you put it brilliantly. You said 50 years, both sides. And I think that's what's so amazing about your dad, is that he didn't just take one point of view and stick with it. He talked continuously to both sides of the conflict, Israel, Palestine. And he wanted to listen, he wanted to understand the people. He wanted to understand what motivated them, what they cared about. And for me, it was just this incredible resource. So rather than one person, as with Nixon, or with some of the other topics in the series, we had this subject and we had a prism, which was your father's amazing ability to get the best out of both sides of this conflict.
Liz, as Marion points to in your episode, David Frost versus Richard Nixon, obviously it's just one subject, but it wasn't a shortage of footage to pick from. You had to go through 28 hours, which is not always the most exciting content.
No, although moments of it are, I mean, you sort of are falling asleep through various, you know, foreign policy memories, but parts of it are absolutely gripping. And what's really fascinating about that 28 hours is watching the relationship between David Frost and Richard Nixon go through different kind of, you know, different stages and watching the way they sort of, the way your father sort of plays with Richard Nixon, easing him into a comfort, then going on the attack, the banter, which has never been seen before. I mean, the privilege of watching things that no one's ever seen.
And as you mentioned, there was a lot of it, of the background to get there. And the first half or so of the 28 hours didn't go that well for Dad until this moment, which was one of the first hugely significant lines to come out of it.
In the Houston plan, it's stated very clearly, use of this technique is clearly illegal. It amounts to burglary.
Why did you approve a plan that included an element like that that was clearly illegal?
Yes, well, burglary is the word, but another way to put it is that you get the information that you need. There are some actions that have to be covert. By covert, let me put it this way.
Or in this case, illegal.
That's right. Well, let me say that it is legal, in my view.
So what, in a sense, you're saying is that there are certain situations, and the Houston plan, or that part of it was one of them, where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation or something, and do something illegal.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
If the president does it, it's legal by definition. It was not legal. And Nixon only escaped a full accountability because he was pardoned.
I think there's, throughout making the series, we tried to pick out moments of the archive that would resonate. And this is a powerful example.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's possibly the most famous line from the interviews. I mean, I think one of the big challenges in making this program was that Watergate and Nixon's other crimes are immensely complicated. And what I think we've managed to do through a tremendous collaborative effort is explain this really quite complex piece of history in a way that's entertaining and also embeds it in this encounter. And that line, I mean, everyone we interviewed for the film said, this is what's been overturned in the past year in America, this idea that the president will be held to account. It's not true that if the president does it, it's not illegal. The Supreme Court in Nixon's case said, no, you're wrong. You do have to do what Congress tells you to do. We're seeing something quite different happening in America now.
Yeah, there's echoes, but then there's also these differences. No, I agree with that. And Marion, it's interesting that we saw there in that clip, Bob Woodward, who's a great contributor to have in Liz's episode on Nixon, and Liz also got to interview people like Ron Howard and Michael Sheen. As for high-profile modern-day contributors that I guess, Dad's name still drew in, you had some pretty epic interviews to carry out.
We were very lucky. Both Tony Blair and Bill Clinton agreed to be interviewed for the show on the Middle East because, don't forget, certainly for Clinton, the whole of his presidency, it began with the Oslo Accords, it ended with Camp David, where they so nearly got there. And it's a subject about which, even now, 25 years on, he wants to keep present because had he succeeded in pulling off a peace deal, we would not be where we are today. And likewise, Tony Blair, what's so fascinating is that he did achieve peace, but in Northern Ireland, which becomes a rubric, a model for what can be done. The day they said would never come. And your father got the key interview with Clinton and with Blair, talking about how peace can be possible. It's heartbreaking when you look at what's happening today.
It certainly is, and that dichotomy in the 90s of success in Northern Ireland and failure in the Middle East is a striking moment in your episode, Marion. The clip we've got from the David Frost Archive of the Middle East is, in fact, the first Middle East interview that Dad did, and this is just fresh off the back of Israel's success in the Six-Day War, an interview, the first, unbelievably, interview with their successful general, Moshe Dayan, in 1968.
Are there, in fact, though, you think, things that the Arabs could teach the Jews? I mean, do the Arabs have qualities you admire?
I do believe that we can live together with the Arabs and that they can live together with us. I think it's a matter that can be settled. They don't like the fact that in Israel or in Palestine, a Jewish state was built here and established here. But I don't think there is anything basic, personal, that would deny them living together with us in a good and close friendship.
In a sense, do you feel the Arabs have a case for feeling that well, perhaps even that the...
I feel that if I were an Arab, I probably would have thought the same way.
It's quite an extraordinary answer, that, isn't it, from a victorious military leader of one side?
It's phenomenal. You know, from this black and white clip when your dad was 29 to Netanyahu in 2012, I mean, extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary that he covers such a gamut. And, you know, he talks to Yasser Arafat many times, many times. He talks to Yitzhak Rabin, the hero of the Middle East who so nearly brought peace before he was assassinated. He talks to Shimon Peres. It's a real sense that here we have an epic, intimate history of this conflict that's still with us today, and indeed worse today. I mean, everyone should watch this programme to understand. I'm not just saying this as the director. It's what your father achieved by getting the inside scoop from all the key players.
I would say as well, I've really learnt a lot in the making of that episode in particular. And I think for my generation, we'll be struck by how close things were in the 90s. And again, I think it just adds to the tragedy. And I think for sure, if Dad was around today, he'd be heartbroken. Liz, just to sort of wrap things up, what is so extraordinary about the Nixon episode is that it has been told and celebrated once before with great film stars and directors. I think, you know, masterfully what you've achieved in this. I think you've made it even more dramatic than the dramatisation. And oddly, as roles get reversed, the stars of the dramatisation become part of the documentary retelling.
Yes, I mean, that was fun. It was partly born of necessity because a lot of the wonderful team your father had around him are no longer with us. Whereas the Nixon people were very keen to get Nixon's side of the story across. But one of the highlights of making this was showing the original clips, again, to Ron Howard and Michael Sheen, who, especially Michael Sheen, spent a lot of time thinking about what was going on in your father's head, and having that response channeled. But, you know, watching the original footage does make the drama, as good as it is, pale.
I think it certainly does. And we, of course, have 3 episodes that are out today. David Frost versus Richard Nixon, David Frost versus the Middle East, and also David Frost versus Elton John. Francis, the director of that episode, can't be with us because it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Francis. We miss you here. And guys, to the two of you, to Francis, but really the entire team that worked on this project, I'm immensely grateful. You've done a brilliant, brilliant job, and I can't wait for people to enjoy these final 3 episodes. Thanks for stopping by this morning. Great to have you with us. And as we go to break, we're going to enjoy a little clip of the episode we haven't discussed yet this morning, David Frost versus Elton John. We'll be back after a short break and this clip.
And you've known me a long time. You've seen me. You've seen me when I've been happy. You've seen me when I've been troubled. You've seen me when I've been oblivious and on another planet, probably. But it's the first time I've had peace of mind. It shows. It shows just the way I know it. I just feel it.
Everybody feels it. I think you look 10 years younger. I sense you more at peace than I've ever seen you before, too. More at peace.
Yeah, I think that's there's no inward battle going on anymore.
This is very early in my sobriety. I've been sober now for 33 years. But this was an early, I'm looking at my face and I look so happy and I'm so different to the person I was before. It wasn't hard for me to get sober. It was joyous.
We're all flawed. It's just that I realise what my flaws are now. I can do something about them. And there are so many millions of people who have the same problems as me and they don't communicate because they don't think people will want to be there for them. And if any of you are out there listening, it's okay to ask for help. I didn't think it was, because I thought it was a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a very spiritual thing to do, to ask another human being to help you. And I'm very glad I did. And now, as a result, my life has changed so much.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380.
Flying Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Let's just remind you of what's been taking place in Saudi Arabia in the last 30 minutes or so. President Trump has been making comments at the Gulf-US summit hosted by Saudi Arabia. It's the last significant part of his stop there before he flies to Qatar later today and then on to the UAE. He made about a 15 or so minute set of comments to an assembled group of Middle Eastern leaders of effusive praise, really, for the region, for the individual countries assembled, even some non-negative comments towards some of America's traditional rivals in the region, saying very clearly he wanted to make a deal with Iran, saying that sanctions with Syria would be lifted. He mentioned also he'd had a phone call with President Erdogan alongside Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman just earlier on in the morning. That is the final stages of his stop in Riyadh, and he'll be due to take off to Qatar in the next hour or so, and we'll have some more coverage of that for you when it happens.
Well, close to home, the Royal College of Psychiatrists has pulled its support for the assisted dying bill. MPs in Westminster will debate the bill, which would legalise assisted dying in England and Wales on Friday. It comes after plans to legalise the practice in Scotland past the first stage. Holyrood, 70 MSPs back the bill, which would allow terminally ill, mentally competent adults to seek medical help to end their lives. It's now going to be scrutinised by Scottish Parliament ahead of that final vote. So we're joined by Sadia, because you've been following and tracking two people on the opposing ends who are terminally ill. It's Phil and Claire. This has been quite a long journey for you too.
Yeah, this is a huge week in the assisted dying issue, and it means an awful lot to people on both sides of the debate. And last year we set out to speak to people who would fit the cohort of those who are eligible to be given assisted dying if it were law already. Claire and Philip, as you mentioned, two wonderful people, really amazing. They're really warm and incredible, but also really funny. And when we spent time with them, they have moved away from arguments around suffering and burdens. And if you watch this film, you'll see that actually they make you feel really good about life and death. And they made us laugh along the way as well.
I would like to have the choice that at a time and place of my choosing, when death is close, to be able to take something to hasten my death.
There could be a cure for what you and I have got, but we just don't know about it.
There are amazing
So you don't know what
advances.
miracle is just around the corner, and if you commit suicide, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity.
Being able to let go, to feel safe.
Once you've drunk that, my friend, you cannot change your mind. What about the poor suckers who are there with you? They've got to live with the fact that you died, and they let you.
My daughters are completely supportive of assisted dying.
I was given 6 months to live. Last year, I should be dead.
This is an absolute decision about myself. It's not about other people with terminal or life-limiting disease. It's certainly not about people with disabilities.
It's financial. You can save millions of pounds by getting people to bump themselves off.
Sadia, it's a really powerful piece and an important piece, as you said, ahead of the ongoing debates and votes on this. Just remind us what is the next stage here in England and, of course, what happened yesterday.
So the next stage for us is a debate on Friday. It is a delayed debate. It was supposed to take place in May. That's been pushed in April. That's been pushed back now to May. And it comes after a long process of amendments. I think 29 amendments that have been put forward, and much has changed in the bill since the second vote, which was in November. And there are indications from MPs that they may vote differently, because if you remember, in November, it had an absolute majority of support for the bill. Now, lots of people saying, and of course, with the Royal College of Psychiatrists pulling their support away, lots of concerns about, you know, have the safeguards been taken away? Is there enough in there for people to trust that it will, you know, be a robust bill when it comes to the next stages?
And just tying it back to Phil and Claire there, it was one of those rare moments, I think, where a debate that's intensely emotional was balanced and both sides listened to each other, which I thought was quite remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is quite a quintessentially British film, if you look at it. It's two people who come together, there's tea and toast, there's wit, there's a tiny bit of passive-aggressiveness, but overall it is an intellectual debate. It is two people having a heated but really polite exchange about a matter that is at the heart, currently at the very heart of British society.
It's been very respectful, the debate so far in Parliament. I do wonder if that will be something that's able to maintain right until the end. It's sort of easier to be respectful, I guess, when it's not quite kind of crystallising. But we'll see in the days ahead.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sadia, great stuff, as always. Thank you so much for that. You can watch the full version of Sadia's excellent report online throughout the day here on Sky News and, as we said, online as well. Right, let's have a look at the weather now.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of the week looks warm and settled, with the shower risk reducing, but eastern coast will be cooler. It's mostly fine out there now, if a little chilly for some, but parts of northeast Britain are grey. That cloud will move across northeast England this morning, but elsewhere it will be mostly sunny. It'll be largely dry, but a few showers will break out across the south of Ireland and southwest England. It'll turn out warm, although eastern coasts will be cooler, especially in the brisk wind down on the North Sea. The afternoon looks mainly fine, but showers in the southwest will turn heavier, with hail and thunder possible in southwest Ireland. That's your weather.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
As we wrap up the hour, just going to bring you a bit of a soundbite coming out of the US Agriculture sector, Secretary Brooke Rollins. This was just moments ago.
As I stated yesterday, on May 8th, which was last Thursday, on Victory Day, President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer announced a historic trade deal, which provides an unprecedented opportunity for our two nations to work together to boost economic prosperity and national security across the world. This deal creates billions of dollars in opportunity for new export markets for U.S. agricultural stakeholders, is a great first step toward making our ag trade relationship more reciprocal, sets the stage for us to work together to reduce tariffs and unnecessary trade barriers, and will work to increase choice for consumers across the United Kingdom and the United States. This week, I've had great meetings across London. Was privileged to meet with leaders from your government, Secretary Reid, Secretary Reynolds, Secretary Miliband, Under Secretary Shanks, as well as visiting 10 Downing Street yesterday to meet with the Prime Minister's Special Advisor on Business and Investment.
That was the US Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins speaking on the King's Road in London outside of Whole Foods. Whole Foods, of course, owned by Amazon, the US company. Mari, I guess of this US-UK trade deal, the agricultural part is probably a part that the British government wants to sort of sweep under the rug a little bit and not attract too much attention on.
Yeah, it's something in terms of the polling, the UK population aren't very keen with being aligned with US food standards. They see US food standards as a little bit kind of, grubby, chlorinated chicken, hormone-injected beef. It's not the kind of thing people like. People much prefer EU food standards, French, Italian alignment, as it were.
Although, of course, the food standards was something that the government was clear hadn't changed in their deal. We're out of time here, I'm afraid, on The Breakfast Show this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Up next, Sky News Today with Gareth Barlow.